The reeds rustle before you do. Somewhere near the edge of the barley field, a frog croaks with the confidence of something that's never had to swat flies for a living. You, on the other hand, are already up, or mostly up. Up here means sitting hunched on a wobbling basket, your feet numb from last night's dew, and your spine locked into a shape that suggests poor decisions in several lifetimes. You shift slowly, feeling every grain of sand that's wedged itself into your tunic. It itches in ways that only ancient linen can, an itch that moves around like it's trying to play hide and seek with your soul. Your job is simple. You are a scarecrow, a human one, which is a fancy way of saying you sit very still until you don't, then flail wildly at birds who have no fear of you and, frankly, no respect. There's no special training, no badge, just the slowly dawning realization that your entire existence today will consist of shouting at ibises and praying they care. Spoiler, they don't. The sun, which has no concept of mercy, begins its climb. Egyptian mornings are polite, like a handshake. But by mid-morning, the handshake turns into a chokehold. You watch it happen with the resignation of someone who knows the day will eventually cook you like a side of fish forgotten in a clay oven. The field around you is golden. Poetically, yes, but mostly painfully. It reflects heat back at you. You hold a rattle. It's made of reeds and filled with pebbles, designed to startle birds, small children, and sometimes yourself. It makes a sound that suggests something broke in the universe. You rattle it every few minutes, especially when the crows land with the smugness of those who've seen you nap before. They remember. They always remember. One of them caws in your direction with the particular vocal tone of someone who's about to poop on your authority. You wave. It does not leave. You rattle harder. It blinks at you like it's considering unionizing. There's a little mat nearby, meant for sitting, but the mat has holes in it, and one edge curls up like it's ashamed to be here. So you sit on the basket instead, because at least it offers the illusion of height. From here you can see the irrigation channels, thin veins of water crawling lazily across the parched earth, whispering secrets to thirsty stalks. Sometimes you imagine diving into one, splashing dramatically, pretending you're a noble crocodile instead of a part-time bird deterrent with chronic sunburn and sand in places you stopped naming. Your lunch is wrapped in a palm leaf, bread, if you can call it that, more like a well-meaning rock. There's a smear of something, bean paste or crushed hope, hard to tell. You chew without thinking, jaw grinding slowly as your eyes remain locked on a pigeon making very deliberate steps toward a barley sprout. You throw a pebble. It misses. The pigeon doesn't even flinch. You consider throwing the bread instead, but it's the only thing less afraid of you than the birds. Behind you, in the vague distance of straw-roofed homes and mud walls, your younger brother is probably pretending to be sick. He gets to rest today. His version of illness usually involves sprawling under the fig tree and loudly sighing while someone else fans him. You used to be the one under the fig tree, before you got tall enough to be intimidating to wildlife. A cruel irony. Your growth spurt earned you this job, and now your knees have regretted it every single day since. A beetle crawls across your foot, uncaring and heavily armored. You envy it. It has a shell. You have a thin tunic, a questionable hat, and dignity that leaks out slowly with every crow that poops within 10 feet of you. There's a farmer nearby. Not your farmer, but a farmer nonetheless. He's whacking at something with a stick. Possibly a bird. Possibly the ground. Hard to tell from this distance. He's yelling too. You imagine he's saying, "Why did I make my child do this?" You imagine your own father saying, "Because someone has to." You imagine your mother saying, "Because he's not smart enough to sell fish." This is what passes for encouragement around here. At some point, the sun blurs the edges of everything. You start to hallucinate a little. A pigeon waddles in rhythm with a chant stuck in your head. The rattle in your hand becomes a metronome of despair. The flies, which are always present, now form a sort of community around your left ear. They buzz like gossiping neighbors who've caught you napping. Again. You slap the air lazily. They scatter. They return. They always return. A gust of wind stirs the barley, and for a moment, it feels like the field is applauding your efforts. You bow theatrically, then remember that your tunic doesn't cover much when you do that. The wind is hot, by the way, not refreshing. It's the kind of wind that smells faintly of old garlic and disappointment. You breathe through your mouth, but the air tastes like sand and yesterday's mistakes. Afternoon is a long, slow death. Time melts. Your skin does too. The rattle becomes heavier, though it weighs almost nothing. You start using your voice more, calling out nonsense words in a tone that suggests you've snapped. It works for a while. The birds look concerned. Then they realize you're bluffing. They return. One brings friends. You swear the biggest one winks at you. At last, a shadow creeps across the field, long and slow and shaped like someone with slightly more authority. It's the neighbor's boy. He's here to relieve you. You hand him the rattle with the solemnity of a man passing down a cursed heirloom. He doesn't thank you. He's already yelling at the birds like it's a game. He doesn't yet know the birds have a union. You trudge home. Sand in your sandals, sun on your back. A new blister forming in the precise spot where your dignity used to live. The house smells like cooked lentils and sibling smugness. Your brother is asleep under the fig tree, face down in a pile of dates, one of which is stuck to his cheek. You do not remove it. You sit on the floor. You sip warm water from a clay cup that has a crack in the side but never actually leaks. You listen to the birds in the distance, now mocking someone else. You close your eyes and imagine a life where your only job is to sit in the shade and do nothing at all. Maybe in the afterlife. Maybe in your next one. The linen sticks to your back. Your palms are raw. The sand is still in your ears. But you are not in the field anymore. And for tonight, that's enough. The wind dies. The sky fades. The birds quiet down. And somewhere nearby, a man prepares a fresh batch of fermented fish paste, which, as it turns out, is where your next job begins. It begins just after the fields have quieted, though not because the wind has died down. In truth, it was never much of a wind to begin. No, the silence comes because the drumbeat has stopped. That dreadful thumping that started before sunrise, announcing the death of some merchant, scribe, or potter's third wife. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that they've paid for tears, and yours are on the schedule. You have been hired to weep, and you do so with the practiced flourish of a woman who has not slept properly since the barley harvest. Your throat is dry, your eyes are already sore, and your feet, those unfortunate appendages, are caked in a mixture of river mud and graveyard dust that never quite dries nor washes off. You wail on command now. It used to be a choice, but like most things, it has become a muscle memory, like chewing bread without enough teeth, or nodding respectfully when someone refers to your role as important. You are what's called a lamentation specialist, a professional mourner, a full-time grief artisan with a seasonal schedule and zero job security. There are others like you, though no one ever talks during the breaks, mostly because everyone is too tired to be sad for real. You have competition. The widow's cousin once brought in her niece because she had more believable sobs. That girl had a shrillness to her that still echoes in your ears. Fortunately, she cried herself hoarse after 2 funerals and now sells lentils in the market with the haunted look of someone who saw too much incense too fast. The morning is thick with the smell of burned herbs and overripe figs. Both are gifts for the dead, or perhaps the living, depending on how superstitious the family is. You step into the courtyard with the stiffness of someone who has been hunched over too many dirt altars. Your sandals stick slightly to the clay ground, pulling at your resolve as much as your soul's. The other mourners are already in formation, their faces arranged in various stages of performative despair. One is sniffling. Another has a smear of charcoal under her eyes for emphasis. You don't bother with theatrics. Your voice is your paintbrush, and your canvas is the collective guilt of 100 unpaid debts and poorly tended graves. You begin with the low wail. Not too dramatic. This isn't a king. Just enough to remind everyone that loss is inconvenient and expensive. Your cry trembles with the weight of too many recycled metaphors. Rivers running dry, gates of the underworld creaking open, the ever-weeping moon. You've used them all before. No one notices or cares. The family is too busy pretending they love the deceased, and the neighbors are too busy watching to see who showed up late. The sun climbs higher. It presses down on your scalp like a hot palm, and you resist the urge to scratch. Sweat trickles behind your ears and settles in the creases of your neck. You taste salt when your lip trembles. Whether it's emotion or dehydration, even you can't tell anymore. The funeral stretches. Every mourner has a verse. You've long since stopped listening. You think about lunch, and then feel guilty for thinking about lunch, which oddly fuels your next round of sobs. Guilt is great for grief work. So is indigestion. When the procession begins, you walk with measured heaviness, clutching your rented robe close as if sorrow might escape otherwise. It's a scratchy wool number that's been worn by at least 6 other mourners this season alone. It smells like sorrow and boiled onions. Someone in the crowd is crying for real now. Maybe the wife, or the servant, or someone who regrets something. You file that noise away for inspiration next time. Authenticity, even borrowed, has value. The grave is a shallow scoop of baked earth, not much deeper than your knees. The body is wrapped tight, like a neglected parcel waiting to be forgotten. As they lower it, you scream. Not because you feel anything, but because silence would feel suspicious. The family expects noise, and you are nothing if not professional. Your throat scratches raw, like dragging reeds over stone. You don't stop. You can't. This is what they paid for. This is your craft. By mid-afternoon, it's over. The guests disperse, and you lean against a crumbling wall in the shade, trying not to pass out. Someone hands you a piece of dried fig as payment. You accept it with the same expression you use for all wages, blank but grateful. You eat it slowly, chewing each grainy bite like it holds meaning. It doesn't. It tastes like yesterday's dust and tomorrow's disappointment. Your feet are tired, not from walking, but from standing in other people's sadness. It's a specific kind of weariness, like being a sponge that's never fully wrung out. You sit for a moment on the edge of a dry cistern, watching the sun cast long, judgmental shadows across the courtyard. You scratch your scalp absently. You've been meaning to wash your hair, but mourning doesn't allow for vanity. Also, water is scarce. Also, you're too tired. Someone passes by and nods respectfully. You have a powerful cry, they say, but not aloud. Just in the way their eyes avoid yours while their feet speed up. You nod back, equally silent. Compliments are dangerous things. They make you care again. And caring leads to actual tears, which are far more exhausting than the professional kind. Back at your shared hut, there's a sliver of lentil mash left from yesterday. You scrape it into your mouth without ceremony. Your neighbor is grinding barley next door with the vigor of someone who's not yet been hired to wail professionally. Her child cries for no reason. You pause and wonder briefly if that's how it begins. Some primal noise you never unlearn, just hone and file into shape. The mat on the floor smells like old straw and mildew, but you lie down on it anyway, curling up with the stiffness of someone whose joints have opinions. Your robe scratches your skin. The back of your neck is coated in dried sweat and sorrow. Somewhere outside, another drumbeat starts up. Another death. Another performance. You sigh, not from sadness, but from muscle memory. Your voice will hold for one more day. Maybe two. Maybe longer if the figs are generous and the incense doesn't choke you first. The room darkens. The heat lifts just slightly. You shift on the mat and close your eyes, letting the hum of cicadas fill the spaces where grief used to live. Tomorrow, someone else will die, and you'll cry, just like always, because the cry is never done. And neither, it seems, are you. The sour scent hits you before the heat does, rising up from yesterday's buckets. The street is still slick with the night's refuse, a glistening sheen of animal droppings, dishwater, and the faintly glutinous runoff from a butcher's stall 2 alleys over. You adjust your grip on the pole, the one balanced across your shoulders, weighted on each end with sloshing clay pots that rock with every step like a warning bell you can't ignore. Your tunic clings to you already, though the sun hasn't yet breached the upper eaves. That means it's going to be one of those days. The kind where the smell seeps into your hair. Again, there is no glamour in your trade. You do not sculpt marble, nor command legions, nor even sell fruit with the right amount of bruises. You collect urine, and not even for your own purposes. You collect it for the fuller, that stern-faced launderer who beats woolen togas into submission with clay and ammonia and disdain. He pays for the contents of your pots, though not nearly enough to justify the trauma they cause your nostrils. You are, essentially, a middleman in the grand supply chain of public excretion, a purveyor of bodily waste, a custodian of communal inconvenience. You begin with the pots along the curb, public receptacles for anyone who couldn't make it to the bathhouse or simply didn't bother. They're squat, wide-mouthed things that invite both convenience and error. Children mistake them for toys. Drunkards use them for purposes beyond their design. Sometimes you find things in them that shouldn't be yellow at all. But you can't be picky. Not in this line of work. Not in this city. You tilt one pot carefully into your own, trying not to spill, though the stone underfoot shifts beneath you, sticky and slick in all the wrong ways. A rat skitters past with the confidence of someone who's lived here longer than you have. You don't flinch. You haven't flinched in months. Not since the day you reached into a barrel and pulled back a hand that smelled like copper and regret. You wash less now. There's no point. You'll never be clean again. Not really. At the next alley, you pause by the tavern's rear wall. The pot here is full, almost to the brim, and warm, which tells you the regulars have been generous last night. You give it a grateful nod, though your gratitude is more existential than personal. Full pots mean full payment. In theory. In practice, it means more weight to carry, more sloshing down your legs, and more chance that something fermented just enough to bubble. The fuller says bubbles mean strength. You try not to think about what that means. Your arms ache by the third block. The muscles along your neck throb in dull protest, and your lower back begins to whisper the familiar tune of failure. You adjust the pole, shifting the load slightly, and one of the pots sways dangerously close to spilling. You imagine for a moment what it would be like to drop one entirely, to let it shatter on the cobblestones and watch the city absorb it without consequence. But you won't. Pots cost money, and dignity, you've learned, is surprisingly expensive when it's baked into clay. You pass by a bakery, and for a brief moment, the scent of rising dough nearly overwhelms your cargo. It's so strange and sweet that it startles you. You breathe it in too deeply, and it mixes horribly with the sour tang wafting from your pots. The result is confusion, hunger wrapped in nausea. You wonder if the baker's apprentice looks at you with pity or revulsion. You wonder if there's a difference. At the public latrine, the real work begins. This is where the wealthier urine lives. Patron-class ammonia. The kind the fuller claims whitens the wool better. You lean your pole against the wall and begin the transfer, ladling carefully from the communal basins into your pots. It's a strange ritual, sacred almost, if one were to confuse the sacred with the unspoken social contract of people who relieve themselves in shared stone troughs and hope the man with the pots knows when to stop scooping. The latrine keeper nods at you, but doesn't speak. He never does. You suspect he envies your mobility, or perhaps he simply respects the hierarchy of filth. His hands are cracked and always damp, and he smells like soap's absence. You nod back, equally silent. Words don't help here. They just hang in the air, absorbing odor. By midday, the pots are nearly full, and your legs feel hollow. You trudge toward the fuller's workshop with the gait of someone trying to carry shame without letting it leak. The fuller is not a patient man. He waves you inside without looking up from the vat where he stomps damp wool into submission with feet that have never once met a sandal. His toenails are something you try not to dwell on. You unload the pots one at a time, lining them up in a row. The fuller inspects them like a sommelier, sniffing and swirling with a reverence you find both offensive and vaguely admirable. He nods once and tosses you a coin. It clinks against the ground. You let it stay there for a moment before stooping to pick it up. Your knees creak like overused hinges. The walk home is quieter, lighter physically, but somehow heavier in spirit. You no longer carry the weight of your haul, but the stink has sunk into your tunic, your skin, your pores. You pass by the fountain and pause, looking at the water. You could rinse. People do. But you know it won't help. Clean on the outside only feels like lying. Your neighbor is sweeping dust from her doorstep when you arrive. She wrinkles her nose at you, and then offers a fig. You accept it. There's an understanding between the underpaid. You eat it slowly, trying to pretend the sweetness isn't ruined by the residue of everything you've done today. You fail, but you chew anyway. Inside, your mat is slightly damp. You don't ask why. It's best not to know. You lie down, the weight of your empty pot still echoing in your shoulders. Your nose twitches, involuntarily, even in the silence. You've learned not to cry when your eyes burn. It's just the ammonia now. Just your job. Just your life. Somewhere, another pot is filling. Somewhere, another stain waits to be lifted. And tomorrow, your pole will be full again, your route the same, your steps exact. There is comfort in the repetition, or perhaps just resignation. You close your eyes and breathe through your mouth, the way you've learned to do when the air is thick with everything you don't want to remember. The coin from the fuller presses into your palm, still damp from the street. You do not let go. And somewhere in the warm distance, the faint sound of fabric being beaten against stone suggests your work is never truly done. The chill still lingers behind your knees as you shuffle stiff-legged across the packed earth, following the honks. It's not so much a sound now as a condition of life, like wind, or toothache, or regret. Morning creeps up like a poorly trained dog, sniffing around your ankles, but refusing to commit to warmth. And in this half-light, with your hands tucked under your arms and straw clinging to your tunic from where you slept last night, next to a goose that breathes louder than you do, you remember dimly and without enthusiasm that you are a goose herder. Still, again, perhaps always. There is no one else awake, of course. That would suggest a civilization that valued you. The Lord's Hall is shuttered and silent, cloaked in expensive darkness. The cowherds will be up soon, those snobs, and the pig boy will slouch out eventually, smelling of vinegar and despair. But for now, the morning is yours, and so are the geese. You and they and the smell. They do not wait. They never do. They honk and shove and jostle, waddling toward the fields like a feathered riot, with no sense of consequence. You follow behind, not because you're in charge, but because you're vaguely warmer when you're moving. Their droppings dot the path like little reminders that dignity is optional and boots are not waterproof. Not your boots, anyway. You once had good wool wrappings, but they now serve as nesting material for a particularly aggressive gander named Simon. You let him have them. He negotiated with beak and wing. The thing about geese, you've learned, is that they're not pets, nor are they really livestock. They are feathered land pirates, filled with malice and spite, and the sort of honking self-importance that you can only respect from a safe distance, which you are rarely afforded. You have the scars to prove it. Faint white lines across your shins where goosebills have left their toothless, humiliating mark. Breakfast, when it arrives, is cold barley mash in a splintered bowl that smells of turnips and other people's hands. You eat it sitting on an overturned bucket while watching the geese fight over a puddle. One of them wins. You're not sure which, but you know it wasn't you. Your only real company is the scrawny brown goose who's taken to following you around like a failed apprentice. He honks at odd times and tries to chew your sleeve. You've named him Father Gregory, after the priest who once spat on your shoes. You think sometimes about other jobs, romantic ones, like Miller's assistant, or that boy who turns the spit in the castle kitchens. But then you remember, Millers are missing fingers, and the spit boy never blinks anymore. You, on the other hand, have a warm, well, warmish, flock of animals who scream at clouds and bite children. It's not a bad life, just one that constantly smells like wet hay and poultry breath. Midday is no different from morning, except everything aches slightly more. The sun has the decency to appear, briefly, before vanishing behind a cloud shaped like regret. You pull your cloak tighter, though it does very little. More patch than fabric now, and most of the stitching done with twine meant for onion bundles. Still, it cuts the wind just enough to make you wish it cut more. You nap a little on your side in the field, one eye open, because last week a fox made off with one of the goslings, and the lord's wife wept as if she'd lost her only son. You were not paid in coin, but in disappointment. Today, the fox does not come, but one of the older geese attempts to sit on your head while you sleep. You're unsure whether it was dominance or affection. With geese, there's very little difference. The village children pass you on their way to fetch water. They stare, not in admiration, nor in cruelty, just curiosity, as if you're not entirely human, as if, having lived this long among the geese, you've changed somehow. And maybe you have. Your gait has shortened. You hiss when startled. You guard your meals. A boy throws a clod of dirt in your direction and runs. You do not chase him. You simply note his face. One day he will try to steal an egg, and on that day, justice will be swift and beaked. Evening comes with the scent of damp wool and the slow, reluctant gathering of birds. You guide them home with shouts and gestures, and in one case, a soft bribe of mashed turnip. They file into the lean-to where they'll sleep, clustered like angry clouds with feathers. You curl beside them, because that's where you sleep too. Not out of duty, but because your bed is a sack of straw under a drafty eave, and the geese, for all their sins, are warm, and occasionally quiet. When they sleep, they breathe like old men and twitch like dreamers. You feel oddly comforted by this, even when one of them pecks your foot in their sleep. You smell of feathers and fermented barley, and something unnameable that comes from living too long in the company of creatures who believe spitting is a form of affection. Your hands are cracked. Your ears are wind-burnt. Your soul is honked at daily, but you have learned to live with it. You are the goose herder, after all. You are not admired, but you are known. And in this village, to be known is a sort of luxury. The stars appear one by one, like regrets. You lie among your feathered companions, pressed between two that snore through their beaks. Your knees ache. Your shoulders are damp. Something cold presses against your back that may be a goose, or maybe your own mortality. You try not to think about it. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Somewhere nearer, a gander shifts his weight onto your ankle. You grimace, but do not move. Comfort is a myth, but stillness is achievable. You close your eyes and listen to the soft rustle of down and the occasional contented hiss. And you wonder, briefly, what it might be like to have a job where no one bites you. But that thought drifts slowly, like a feather on wind, into the twilight of dreams, where perhaps tomorrow your job will smell just slightly less like damp birds and judgment. The wax has already begun to bead down the taper before you even settle into your squat. Not a dignified seat, not a chair, not a cushioned bench embroidered with peacocks and theological confusion, but a squat. One heel pressed flat. One leg asleep before the hour turns. Your robes are too stiff for comfort and too soft for respect. Somewhere above your head, nobles clink goblets and pretend they don't notice the candlelight, your candlelight, keeping their feast from sinking into shadow. You are not part of the celebration. You are not even part of the room. You are part of the candle. The wax drips like the slow passage of time, and your only task is to notice it. All of it. Every change in flame shape, every flicker of air that threatens to nudge the light too far towards scandalous dimness, or, worse, a tablecloth. You are not a server. You are not a guard. You are not decoration. You are a precaution with eyes. Your knees begin to ache before the music starts. Your spine has long given up on expressing its complaints in polite increments and has moved into the realm of silent protest, each vertebra quietly pressing its case against your flesh like little passive-aggressive diplomats. You shift your weight, just a little, enough to keep the blood circulating, but not enough to suggest movement. The candle must not flicker. Your job is to remain so still that wax thinks you are its kin. The candle is tall when you begin, but so are mountains before erosion. It will not stay tall. You know this. You have witnessed 100 such taperings, slow descents of flickering purpose into misshapen puddles. The wax pool will deepen, the wick will rebel, the flame will lean toward the nearest draft, and you must not let it. That is your role. To tame combustion with presence alone. A walking fire code with poor posture and overwashed linen. You watch, and you wait, and you breathe through your nose because you are close enough to the candle to smell its dying. That smell, sharp, warm, vaguely animal, is now part of you. Your sleeves smell like it. Your fingers are waxed with it. You taste it sometimes when you lick your lips out of habit and find the residue of smoke and someone else's opulence. Around you, there is food. So much of it that you question whether any of it is edible. There are dishes that seem to be more prayer than nourishment, stacked in silver trays with carved handles shaped like saints who definitely never ate lamprey pie. You are not invited to partake, but you smell it, and that is almost worse. The meat is always spiced in ways you can't name, heavy with imported arrogance and dreams of warmer cities. It mixes with the wax in your nostrils until your stomach tightens into a knot of longing and surrender. Hunger is not pain anymore. It is just a companion who never shuts up. Every so often someone sneezes in your direction. A noblewoman fans herself with peacock feathers and complains that it's too warm near the candles. You, squatting like an afterthought beside a 5-stick candelabrum, blink slowly and say nothing. Because you don't say things. That's not part of the role. You exist to stare at fire until it behaves. Your robes itch. Not in the way peasants' burlap itches, openly, violently, but in the refined, insidious way of wool that was meant to impress someone who does not wear wool. It itches in seams and folds and behind your ears, like it has its own opinions about your hygiene. Which is fair. You do not smell like money. You smell like sweat trapped beneath duty. and candle grease that's been rubbed into sleeves too many times to be considered incidental. Your neighbor is another watcher, stationed 2 candlesticks down. You've never spoken, but you've exchanged glances like veterans in the same war. Grim nods passed over flickering light. He once scratched his nose and was slapped for it by a steward who mistook him for a servant falling asleep. You learn from others' mistakes. You no longer scratch. You endure. The feast itself is a theater of absurdity. There's a man playing a lute and losing the battle. There are dancers pretending not to be freezing in their gauze-thin silks. There's a dish that smells like mint and fear. At one point, someone knocks over a wine goblet, and the table ripples with murmurs. Not from concern, but because it soaked a piece of parchment that may or may not have been a tax record. Laughter follows. You do not laugh. You do not move. You are allowed 1 moment of reprieve during the 3rd course, when your arm begins to tremble slightly from holding a fresh taper too near the wick for too long. You adjust it, subtly, reverently, like a priest turning a relic. The flame catches, behaves. You whisper thanks inside your own skull, not to a saint, to the flame. Behind you, there's the constant rustle of silk over marble and a whispering that pretends to be polite, but often smells of gossip. Someone is definitely judging someone else's shoes, or their marriage, or their handwriting. You don't know. You don't care. Your candle just guttered on one side. You tilt it ever so slightly, like a breath made flesh. It steadies. You resume your stillness. Crisis averted. Sometimes nobles point you out to visitors. That boy, there, yes, that one. Candle watcher. Important, really. You don't believe them. You know you're not important. You're necessary, which is worse. Important people get remembered. Necessary ones get replaced when they blink too long or fall asleep on their knees and catch fire. You've never caught fire, but you've dreamed of it. Not in a dramatic way. Just in the sense that if your robe caught and someone noticed and you flailed around a bit, they might let you sit down afterward. Maybe. If you survived. You're not paid in coin. You're paid in leftovers. Not in plates, but in rumors. Hastily scraped scraps tucked into a cloth by a kitchen boy who sometimes feels sorry for you. A marrow bone once. A wedge of bread that had seen better centuries. You eat them in the dark after the feast ends, when the wax has cooled and you're allowed to stand up again and your knees refuse to cooperate. You don't go home. There is no home. There is a pallet under the stairwell near the bronze brazier, where it's warm enough to pretend that warmth exists. You lie there with your hands still smelling of smoke, and your ears still ringing with feasting sounds that never included you. Sometimes you press a candle stub into your palm and imagine what it would feel like to hold something just because you wanted to, not because it might fall over and ruin a senator's mood. You sleep as you live that day, still and silent and slightly waxy. And somewhere in the halls above, someone is already planning the next feast, which means another night of leaning, watching, waiting, for flame, for stillness, for the long, slow drip of another job that no one notices until you do it wrong. The wax cools beside you, curled and gray and ghostly. Your hands twitch once, then still again. And just before the dreams come, you wonder faintly if tomorrow's candle will burn straighter, or if the goose herder had it easier after all. The candle wax still clings beneath your fingernails from the night before, though it's dried into tiny chalky half-moons that don't quite scrape away, no matter how many times you rub your fingers along the hem of your tunic. It itches, but everything itches now. Your elbows, your collarbone, the inside of your sleeves, which seem to have developed their own swampy microclimate. Somewhere behind you, a rooster coughs like it's trying to clear its conscience. And beside you, in a clay pot, half covered by a damp cloth, something slithers. The cloth moves, not with drama, but with quiet, grim insistence. A ripple, a squirm, a little flex of something wet and purposeful. You know the weight of that movement by now. It's the weight of trouble with teeth. Your job is simple. At least, that's what the monks always say. Keep them alive, they mutter, as if the leeches are grateful guests at the abbey, lounging in their spa jars and sipping warm blood from porcelain bowls. But the truth is slipperier, much slipperier. Your job is to make sure the leeches don't die, or escape, or worse, die while escaping, which always results in the kind of stench that invites theological reflection. You keep them in clay pots, lidded with rags, tucked inside a wooden chest that smells like swamp and old fear. The leeches hate the light, but they hate you more. They resent the dry air, the stillness, the accidental shaking. They mourn the loss of ankles, veins, and all the other parts of peasants you've borrowed them from. There's one particularly judgmental leech, Horace you call him, who always flattens against the glass when you peer in, as if to remind you he's smarter than you. He might be. He certainly seems more purposeful. Your tunic has leech pockets sewn into the inner lining. At one point, someone probably thought that was a clever idea, a custom garment for biological transportation. But now those stitched little sleeves are always damp, always suspiciously warm, and always filled with the slow, ticklish squirm of something alive and vaguely offended. You keep moving because standing still means noticing just how many of them are nestled beneath your ribs. You do not sleep near the others. That's the first rule of leech work. They won't say it outright. Monks are passive-aggressive like that, but the glances say enough. You smell like the inside of a wound. And worse, you always look like you're about to open a jar of it. This morning, you're tasked with refreshing the blood supply, which means fetching a peasant with a sturdy arm and a vague willingness to lie down. There's no payment, just a nod of monkish approval and a cold slab to rest on. You're not the one who does the cutting, of course. That would be barbaric. The leeches do the work. You just introduce them. You reach into the clay pot and feel the cold, muscular slide of their bodies as they wrap loosely around your fingers. They do not make noise. That makes it worse. Everything in your day is silent and slimy. You've forgotten what it feels like to grasp something dry. They squirm into the pockets automatically, like they know where home is. You press them gently into place, patting them down like stolen goods. Your chest wriggles in response. You pretend not to feel it. The hospital is barely a building, just a stone room with a wooden beam that leans at the exact angle of despair. There are cots inside, stuffed with hay and regret, and patients who either groan too much or not at all. You avoid the ones who've gone quiet. They don't need you anymore. There's a boy waiting today, thin, freckled, probably guilty of something minor like being born poor. He looks at you like you're here to heal him, which is a terrible mistake. You're only here to let the leeches try. You crouch beside him, your knees protesting, always protesting. Your knees have filed formal complaints and stopped expecting responses. You loosen your tunic and let one of the leeches slide out into your palm. Horace, again. Of course. You press him gently to the boy's forearm, right over the vein that bulges like it's trying to escape the appointment. There's always a pause, one long second of refusal before the leech latches on. Then the suck begins. Slow, methodical, horrifyingly personal. You repeat this with 3 more. They line up like grim little sausages, mouths working in rhythmic obscenity. You try not to look directly at them. That makes it worse. Instead, you stare at the wall, at the cracked plaster, and the stain that looks like a saint in agony. The boy trembles a little. You hand him a cloth. It's not clean, but it's familiar. He presses it to his eyes like a child who still believes in rescue. You stay for the full feeding. You always do. You must. The leeches don't know when to stop. Left alone, they gorge until they split. And then you have a patient bleeding and a leech carcass oozing on the floor. There is no dignity in oversucking. You monitor. You supervise. You remove them gently, coaxing them with stale breath and shaking fingers. When you peel them off, they're rounder, sluggish, swollen with secondhand pain. You tuck them back into your pockets, one by one. The warmth spreads across your chest, not comforting, just present. There is no washing station, only a basin with water that remembers the last 20 hands that visited it. You rinse your fingers anyway, out of ritual, not hygiene. Your lunch is a crust, not a piece of bread. A crust. It has no middle, just the outer ring of something once edible. You chew it slowly, with molars that have seen better centuries. Your stomach sighs in resignation. Outside, the weather can't make up its mind. Mist clings to the courtyard like gossip. The air smells like wet hay and someone's forgotten porridge. You pass a monk who nods but doesn't meet your eye. No one meets your eye anymore. It's as if the leeches have made you part of themselves, slippery, unwelcome, persistent. You return the blood-heavy leeches to their jars, layering in fresh moss and a splash of rainwater from the bucket that may or may not be clean. They settle in like drunks after a feast, fat, lazy, and judgmental. You write their names on tiny scraps of parchment. Not their real names, of course. You're not mad, but the names help. Horace, Lumpy, Saint Bernard, Sister Agnes. You track their appetites, their habits. Which ones refuse to bite? Which ones bite too eagerly? You wish you didn't know this much about them, but you do. There are worse things than leeches, but not many that live in your shirt. By evening, your tunic smells of blood, pond, and something metallic you can't quite name. You unlace it carefully, checking for stragglers. Last week, one clung to your ribs for 2 hours before you noticed. You still have the scar. It looks like a tiny mouth that never learned to smile. You eat again. Something warm, barely. A stew that could contain turnip, or towel. You don't ask. You chew with resignation, aware that everything tastes like leech hand now. When night falls, you light your own candle. It's stubby, greasy, smells like it's been reused by someone with regrets. The flame flickers against the walls of your alcove, casting long shadows that look like limbs and regrets. You lie back on your straw pallet and feel the phantom weight of leeches still in your pockets. They're not. You checked. But it doesn't matter. They live in your muscle memory now, in the way your shoulders hunch, in the way you sleep on your side so as not to squish anything accidentally. Your hands are stained, permanently, the kind of stain that lives in your fingerprints, your dreams, your sense of personal space. You press them to your face anyway, just for warmth, just for something human. And as the last of the candle burns down into a misshapen lump, you wonder what tomorrow's patience will bring. A throat? A temple? A wound no one wants to admit to? You exhale into the dark. The mossy, blood-tinged jars breathe back at you. And somewhere not far away, in a room where laughter sounds like treason, someone is waiting to be drained. Softly, beneath it all, your tunic twitches, just once, and then is still. The straw on your sleeping mat still clings to your knees, but that's the least of your concerns. The faintest movement, the smallest stretch, and there it is again, that unmistakable bouquet rising up from your clothes. Not sweat, not damp, not even the mildew clinging to the wooden beams. No, yours is a stench more ancient, more pointed, a scent that announces you long before your boots do. It settles in your pores and behind your ears. It drapes itself around your shoulders like a damp woolen shawl of disgrace. You are a gong farmer, and the world has never let you forget it. It is not the kind of job that one dreams about as a child. But then again, dreams are for people who don't sleep next to buckets that hiss. You used to have a name, short, common, forgettable. But over time, people simply began calling you that gong lad, and then just gong. Sometimes him, when they're being charitable. When they're not, they pinch their noses and mutter something about dinner being ruined. You pull on your boots, which have never fully dried since the last storm, and which harbor secrets no cobbler should ever know. The leather squeaks wetly, as if in protest, or warning, or both. The soles are thick with something you've chosen not to name, thick enough to be structural. You stand slowly, joints clicking like poorly hinged cellar doors. The cold clings to the back of your knees. Your tunic, patched, fraying, forever damp at the hem, hangs with the reluctant weight of long acquaintance. The tools of your trade are waiting by the door. A long-handled scoop, a stained bucket, a torch with wax that drips aggressively, as if it too wants nothing to do with this job. The scoop, affectionately named Old Misery, is worn smooth where your hands have gripped it too many nights in a row. You once tried gloves. They lasted 6 hours before becoming something that needed to be buried. You buried them behind the compost heap, with the ceremony of a war casualty. The night is still, but the stillness is not peaceful. It's that peculiar Tudor sort of silence, thick with fog and the smell of everyone else's dinner cooked over firewood and regret. You trudge past shuttered windows and sleeping livestock. Somewhere, a dog whimpers in its sleep. It might be dreaming of you. Poor thing. The latrines are built like afterthoughts, stacked stone, precariously placed over channels of doom. Public, yet shamed. Communal, yet always empty when you approach. You light the torch and hold it low, not for visibility, just to discourage the rats from making eye contact. The first cesspit is already whispering to you, not literally, though you've had nights where the gases made you think otherwise. It's more of a low, burbling presence, a pulsing reminder that digestion is universal and shame is layered. You brace yourself and remove the covering plank, which groans like a cursed door in a haunted abbey. The smell escapes like a secret finally confessed. Even your nose, seasoned as it is, flinches. You lower the bucket with the delicacy of a man carrying something precious, though it is anything but. The weight at the end of the rope is familiar now, fluid, unpredictable, passive-aggressive. The scoop plunges, meets resistance, and withdraws with a thick slurp that might haunt your grandchildren. You transfer the contents with care. If you spill, the shame becomes permanent. Not that you weren't already drenched in it. You do this over and over. Dip, lift, pour, each movement accompanied by the chorus of your joints and the occasional suspicious splash. Steam rises from the pits. Not warm steam, not friendly steam. This is the kind of steam that feels like it's judging your life choices. You would cover your mouth, but your hands are no longer welcome near your face. You carry the buckets outside and dump them into the official gong cart, an invention designed with more optimism than success. It leaks. Of course it leaks. You've lined it with straw and hope, but both are in short supply. The wheel wobbles as if the cart itself is trying to escape. You'll haul this to the designated dumping ground later when the fog is thicker and no one can see you. Technically, the dumping ground is outside the city walls, but no one checks. Not really. If it's downhill and there are no nobles watching, it's fair game. You take a break, if that's what you can call, standing very still and trying not to breathe too deeply. The torch flickers, casting shadows against the wall that look a bit too much like you. Your stomach growls, not from hunger, but from protest. You've eaten boiled cabbage 3 nights in a row. It's the only thing that doesn't react violently with your current profession. The sun begins to rise somewhere behind the haze, staining the fog a color that can only be described as regretful beige. You wipe your brow with the corner of your sleeve and immediately regret it. The fabric is stiff, crusted with the memory of previous nights. Your skin feels like it's fermenting beneath it. You return the tools to their place behind your shack. No one wants them in the house, not even you. The scoop leans against the wall like an exhausted companion. The bucket gets its own special spot. You'll rinse it tomorrow. Or not. There's always more to fill it. You strip off the outer layer of your tunic and hang it where the breeze might do something useful. The breeze, ever uncooperative, decides to die the moment you do. Your underlayer isn't much better. It smells faintly of despair and long walks through puddles no one should name. You wash your hands in the trough near the garden. The water is cold enough to make your knuckles ache. It doesn't remove the smell. It just adds another one. You dry them on the edge of your trousers and pretend it helped. Then you scratch the back of your neck with a fingernail that might never be clean again. The neighbors avoid you. Politely, but with conviction. You understand? You wouldn't want to stand downwind of yourself either. Children giggle behind their hands and whisper things like Pooh Man or Sir Stink-a-Lot. You've heard worse from adults. There's a girl once, Marjorie, or possibly Maud, who used to talk to you when you were younger, before the job, before your evenings belonged to the pits and the smell began to follow you like a second skin. She got married last spring to a baker's apprentice. Now she walks the other way when she sees you, nose high, hands clutched in her apron, as if you might steal the yeast from her breath. You eat alone, always. Even your bench outside the alehouse is unshared, worn smooth by solitude and buttocks that no longer expect company. The alewife brings your drink without a word, setting it down like she's handling an explosive. You nod. She does not nod back. Still, there is some comfort in routine. You know the town better than anyone. Every alley, every shortcut, every latrine in need of urgent help. You've seen what people try to hide, what nobles pretend doesn't exist, what servants hope will simply vanish by morning. You are, in some way, a guardian of the forgotten, a shepherd of filth, a custodian of the unmentionable. There is a strange dignity in that, if you squint. When the day ends and the sky bleeds into a muddy orange above the rooftops, you retreat to your corner of the world, your little shack, your straw mat, your boots lined up like two guilty secrets. You lie down slowly, each joint reminding you that dignity has a cost. The scent follows you like a lullaby composed by mistakes. You turn to your side. The blanket pulls up to your chin and immediately regrets it. And somewhere, in a hall far above your station, a candle flickers in a chamber pot closet. Tomorrow, it will need emptying. And you'll be there, as always, with your scoop, with your bucket, with your name whispered in disgust. But for now, the stink begins to settle, and the night, mercifully, forgets your profession. The bruises on your legs are fading again, which means it's time to learn something new. You can always tell when a fresh lesson is coming. There's a certain stiffness in the morning air, a kind of anticipatory ache in your ribs, as though your own bones are gossiping about your future before your ears are ready to hear it. And of course, there's the prince, well-fed, glossy, and blissfully unscarred. He yawns through arithmetic. He blinks during Latin. And you, faithful as a shadow, carry the weight of his education, quite literally. Your mattress is thin, not metaphorically thin, but so physically unimpressive it might as well be a slightly committed bedsheet. The stuffing, wool or straw or perhaps just flattened disappointment, has long since migrated toward the edges, leaving your spine to negotiate directly with the floorboards. And negotiate it does. Every morning begins with the crunch of vertebrae like poorly stacked firewood. You roll onto your side, stretching slowly, carefully, as though the mere act of movement might summon a tutor holding a switch. The light filtering in through the frost-kissed panes is polite, almost apologetic. You sit up, rubbing at your eyes with sleeves that have known too many elbows and not enough soap. The room is quiet, which is suspicious. The last time things were this quiet, the prince had forgotten to do his French declensions, and you had spent the better part of the afternoon learning what birch rods feel like against thighs that have already had a long week. Your shoes are where you left them, under the bed, smelling faintly of wet dog and the kind of mildew that only noble corridors can ferment. You ease your feet into them, the leather stiff around your toes like someone else's opinion of comfort. One lace has snapped again, but you tie the ends together and pretend it was always meant to look like a sad little knot of resilience. There's a basin in the corner, with water that insists it was drawn yesterday, possibly last week. You splash it onto your face anyway, out of duty rather than hope. It's cold, sharp, and smells faintly of candle smoke and discipline. You scrub the worst of the night from your skin and pat dry on a towel that's more suggestion than fabric, hanging limp and unimpressed from a crooked peg. Down the hall, breakfast is already underway for the others. Real students, real tutors, real purpose. You eat elsewhere, always have. In the small room behind the servants' corridor, next to the scullery where the bread crusts go when even the kitchen cat has passed judgment, your breakfast is a bowl of congealed something. Gruel, probably, or barley mush. Or maybe just yesterday's porridge that no one remembered to name. It's lukewarm, thick in the middle, and somehow watery at the edges. You spoon it slowly, each mouthful a reminder that you don't eat to enjoy. You eat to remain conscious in the event the prince forgets how to spell consequence again and needs a reminder, with your backside. By the time the lesson bell rings, you're seated at the long table, posture prim and eyes forward, like a scholar. The prince slouches in next to you, smelling of oranges and an attitude that's been carefully bred over centuries. You can't quite decide if he hates you or simply forgets you're a person. Either way, he's not the one holding his breath every time a mistake is made. The tutor, a man with eyebrows like winter hedges and a voice like boiled leather, opens a book the size of a bread oven. Latin today. Again. You mouth the conjugations quietly, not because you'll be tested, but because you've learned the hard way that knowing them is often the difference between walking and limping by sundown. The prince fumbles a declension, stumbles through a tense. The tutor sighs, closes the book with theatrical finality, and turns to you. Of course. You stand without being asked, your chair scraping slightly as it moves. There's a ceremonial rhythm to it now. Bend forward, brace your hands on the desk, and listen to the rustle of cloth and birch behind you. It's not personal. It's educational. Just not for you. The first strike lands like a cruel whisper, sharp, pointed, and familiar. The sting blossoms slowly, blooming through fabric and flesh like a lesson in blood. Another follows, and another. Not too many. Just enough to prove a point that apparently can't be proven with mere words. When it's over, the tutor nods. The prince smirks. You sit down carefully, spine stiff, composure intact. The lesson continues. Grammar, philosophy, geography. You absorb it all, not because it's yours to keep, but because it's the only thing you're allowed to take without being accused of theft. Midday arrives with all the subtlety of a cracked bell. Lunch is served, roasted meats and warm bread for them, a thin stew and a wooden spoon for you. You sit on the edge of the servants' bench, surrounded by silence and steam. The stew is edible, sort of. There's a turnip involved, and possibly something that once swam. You don't ask. Questions are for the privileged. Afternoon lessons are gentler. Music, mostly. The prince plays the lute with the disinterest of someone who's never had to use it to earn a crust. You sit beside him, hands in your lap, occasionally humming the correct pitch when he veers dangerously off-key. The tutor hears it. You know he does. But he says nothing. You are here to be hurt, not heard. Evening arrives like a long sigh. Candles are lit. Cloaks are donned. The prince is escorted away to supper with nobility, all lace cuffs and laughter. You are dismissed. Quietly. unceremoniously, like smoke from a snuffed wick. You walk the halls alone, boots echoing in the cold. The corridor walls lean inward slightly, as though exhausted by centuries of whispered complaints. Your door creaks as it opens, welcoming you back to the straw and shadows. The basin is still cold, the towel still limp. Your clothes still smell of polished wood, chalk dust, and the faint iron tang of humility. You sit on your bed, gingerly, the soreness a dull throb beneath the surface. You pull your blanket around your shoulders. It smells of sleep and sadness. Outside your window, the sky hangs low with damp stars. You think about the things you've learned, the capitals of provinces you'll never see, the philosophies of dead men whose names you can now spell in 3 languages. You know more than the butcher's son, more than the washerwoman's daughter, more than most, and none of it is yours. It belongs to the boy who sits beside you, whose skin remains untouched, whose lashes are metaphorical, and whose failures have always found a home on your body. Still, you carry it. The knowledge, the bruises, the silence, because in a strange, sour way, it's yours. And tomorrow, when the prince forgets again, when the lesson stumbles, when the rod is raised, you'll learn even more. But tonight the floor is quiet. The pain has settled, and the straw shifts like a friend who still remembers your name. And somewhere down the hall, someone is being taught that mistakes have no consequence, except for you. You remember them all. The air is warm and close today, the kind of thick, syrupy warmth that clings to your skin like a guilty secret. You can already feel your robe sticking damply at the armpits before you've even left the sleeping mat, which you suspect is the universe's way of bracing you for the day ahead. Because when your job involves sniffing other people's rearward expressions of dietary regret, comfort is not something the heavens bother sending your way. The quilt is folded carefully to one side, stiff with the salt of old sweat, and your limbs creak as you shift upright. An orchestral protest of joints that have crouched for too long over too many chambers, behind too many screens, beside too many bowels in mid-melody. The mat beneath you is straw-filled and slightly sour from its nightly vigil under your backside. And as you stretch, your fingers find the familiar grit of crumbs, dirt, and a faintly suspicious residue from yesterday's nose-wrinkling encounters. Your water basin is still full from last night, which is a blessing and a quiet curse. Cold water on your face feels like being slapped by a particularly judgmental ghost, but you do it anyway, because walking into your duties with the crust of sleep still coating your eyes would only encourage the court servants to whisper more than they already do. You know what they say. You've heard the laughter when they think you're not listening. There goes the nose with legs. Or worse, the wind interpreter. One time, someone even called you his royal rear-end oracle. You're still not sure whether to feel insulted or impressed by that one. Your robes are plain, but respectable. Cotton that once aspired to grandeur before being worn down by years of sweat, awkward crouching, and close encounters of the digestive kind. You tie your sash loosely. No point cinching it tightly when your day is measured by how quickly you can hold your breath and how convincingly you can nod without gagging. Breakfast is, as usual, a theoretical affair. Rice gruel that tastes mostly like heat and disappointment. A few pickled greens, if the kitchen remembered. You eat slowly, partly to delay the inevitable, partly to prepare your stomach for what it will be near, but not part of, for the rest of the day. The irony of consuming food right before spending hours listening to its endgame is not lost on you. But routines are routines, and besides, empty stomachs make for weak nostrils. The corridors of the palace are already alive with the scurry of slippers and the hush of silk brushing against lacquered floors. You make your way past the scribes, past the minor attendants who nod with that delicate mix of pity and relief. Pity that you exist. Relief that they are not you. Your little pouch of scented cloths swings lightly at your side, tucked beside a wax tablet for notes you're never actually meant to write down. No one wants an official record of such matters. That would make it too real. Today's subject is an older bureaucrat who has been feeling unwell for several days. The physician suspects internal blockage, or an imbalance of qi, or too many dumplings at the mid-autumn feast. It's all very vague. That's where you come in. Because in a world where pulse reading and tongue inspecting are too dignified for certain ailments, someone has to smell the truth. You are led through the back corridor to a private chamber. It is richly furnished but smells faintly of steamed cabbage and nervous silence. The attendant bows slightly and disappears, leaving you with the man and his many robes. You nod respectfully. He looks anywhere but at you. The screen is placed discreetly between you and the performance area, like a mercy curtain at a tragic opera. You crouch. This is the worst part, the waiting. You adjust your breathing, trying to find a rhythm between shallow enough to protect your soul, but deep enough to analyze the character of the emission, as your master once said during your unfortunate apprenticeship. The sound arrives before the scent, which is often the case. A thin, uncommitted whistle, like a bamboo flute played by someone deeply ashamed of their hobby. You freeze, lips pressed tightly together. The moment passes. Then it arrives. There are no words for the exact aroma, but if you were forced to try, it might be something like burnt turnip wrapped in regret, faintly meaty, possibly anxious, with an afternote of medicinal herbs that failed their mission. You take it in, not too deep, just enough to gauge. Then you write. Sharp, lingering, warm, suggests dampness of spleen, possible stagnation. The man shifts behind the screen, and you sense the humiliation radiating through the paper wall. You are used to this. No one ever looks you in the eye after a session. Not that you blame them. The day continues. Another noble, another room. This one's emission is silent, but profoundly assertive, like a ghost of a bad decision made 3 meals ago. You catch notes of fermented soybean, stress, and something worryingly sulfurous. You mentally label it the concubine's complaint. You do not write that down. Later, the youngest son of a mid-ranking official appears for a preventative evaluation. He is cheerful. Too cheerful. He thinks your job is funny. You endure the giggles, the fake sounds, the real ones. You take notes. Mild, playful, inconclusive. You hope he eats too many lotus seeds and regrets his laughter tomorrow. By late afternoon, your nose feels like it has aged a decade. You sit outside in the servant courtyard, chewing on a strip of ginger root to clear your senses, though you suspect nothing short of reincarnation will fully scrub them clean. The sun has begun to slope toward the west, casting long shadows across the cobbled stones. A few other servants pass by, carrying baskets, scrolls, trays, real jobs, respectable jobs. No one carries what you carry. Your little room near the physician's hall is small, and thankfully upwind from the latrines. You fold your robe carefully, hang your pouch on the peg, and lie back on your mat. Your shoulders ache from constant crouching. Your knees are stiff from the day's indignities. Your stomach is quiet, politely waiting for the right moment to remind you that dinner is also part of being alive. You think about smells, always smells, of boiled tea, of wet paper, of sweat, of ink, of embarrassment, and of course, of the human condition, filtered through the intestines and presented to your noble profession. Sometimes you wonder what your mother tells people you do. Maybe something vague. He works in the palace, perhaps. It's not untrue. Your eyes drift shut slowly. There's a lingering echo in your mind, a faint musical note, like the final breath of a duck in mourning. You sigh. You've probably developed a sixth sense. You dream in categories now. Pungent, flat, apologetic, alarmingly festive. Still, there is a strange peace to it all. Someone must do it. Someone must hold the line between polite denial and intestinal truth. And that someone is you. Tomorrow, there will be more. New faces, familiar scents. A job so peculiar it could only exist in a world built entirely on order and whispers. And just down the corridor, someone is preparing a dinner that will make your next report memorable. But for now, the air is quiet, and the night, mercifully, is still. By the time your hands stop smelling like bitter root and damp soil, the bread will be cold again, and the sins will have settled. That's how you mark the end of a long day now. Not with sunsets or bells or rooster cries, but with the slow, sullen cooling of a crust that never quite baked right, a slab of coarse barley made for penance, not pleasure. The kind of bread that tastes like a moral failing and sits in your gut like it's judging yours. The room is still, still enough to hear the thatch roof creaking in rhythm with the shifting wind, a soft seesaw above you like the slow breath of something enormous sleeping just overhead. The fire is stubborn this morning. Not dead, but not lively either. More ember than flame, more mood than heat. You stir the ashes half-heartedly and tuck your toes beneath the rough blanket again. There's no urgency. Not for this kind of job. They'll wait for you. The dead aren't going anywhere, and the living would rather not touch what you're about to. The wool shirt you pull over your head still holds the scent of yesterday's visit. Clay, damp linens, a waft of boiled cabbage that had clung to the grieving widow like a second shawl. Your fingers hesitate over a stain that might be grease, or possibly something older, something absorbed from too many wakes where the sorrow soaked into the floorboards and came up again through your boots. Your boots. You sigh, still damp, still smelling faintly of sheep and sadness. One heel flaps a little now, making your walk sound like an apology with every step. You don't fix it. The squeak has become part of you. Breakfast is a half mug of small beer and the stale corner of a heel someone else discarded last week. You chew slowly. You always chew slowly now. Something about swallowing someone else's sins makes you suspicious of your own stomach, as though it might start rebelling one day and send up all those ghosts in protest. Outside, the sky is a bleak woolen gray, pressing down in low, sagging folds that seem too tired to bother with rain. The grass is slick underfoot, not from dew, but from that eternal Welsh damp that seeps up from the earth like it's trying to drown you subtly, politely, over the course of decades. The path is muddy in the places you expect it to be, and ankle-deep in the places you'd hoped it wouldn't. Your stick sinks in with a heavy squelch. It comes out reluctantly, wearing a little more of the landscape than it went in with. The cottage you approach leans a little to one side, like it's trying to hear the prayers being whispered inside. A small crowd has gathered in the yard. Neighbors, relatives, the usual slow-motion knot of village grief. They don't meet your eye as you approach. They never do. Not because they hate you, not quite, but because they're never sure what part of you is still yours and what part is borrowed from the last man you sat beside. You don't mind, or rather, you've learned to not mind loudly enough that it passes for peace. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and boiled something. You don't ask what. You never ask what. The body lies under a plain shroud, feet toward the hearth, like always. There's a stool by the head and a cracked plate on the table beside it. The bread has already been placed. The ale, too. They always pretend like you won't be long. You sit carefully, keeping your weight on the side of the stool that doesn't creak like a guilty conscience. The bread is heavy in your hand, denser than usual, darker, like the baker was trying to knead shame into the flour. You take a bite, dry, saltless, coarse enough to scrape your gums. And underneath it all, the faintest taste of something sour. Not spoilage, just sorrow that's been baked too long. You chew, slowly, deliberately. The mourners murmur behind you, some muttering prayers, some just muttering. You sip the ale. It's weak and cloudy. It does nothing to wash away the texture of the bread or the feeling of dozens of eyes not looking directly at you. You finish it all. Every crumb. Every drop. Because that's your job. You eat the bread so they don't have to carry the guilt. You drink the ale so they don't have to feel the weight. You leave with the sins on your tongue, and they get to pretend the dead are clean. You are the mop they use to wipe away the part no one wants to name. Outside again, the wind has picked up. The crowd is dispersing, slowly, like sheep nudged away from an unpleasant patch of field. A few nod at you. One old man mutters something that might have been thanks, or might have been a warning. You nod back. You never speak. That's not part of the job. Back home, you wash your hands in the basin that always smells faintly of mildew and old stories. You scrub harder than you need to, but not hard enough to pretend anything is actually coming off. You dry them on the same cloth you've used for the past 6 funerals. It's stiff now, more board than fabric. You fold it anyway. Your supper is plain. You eat alone. You always eat alone. Sometimes you dream of flavor. Not just food, but flavor. Real sweetness, real spice. Something not tied to duty. But those dreams always sour halfway through. You wake with the taste of barley and borrowed guilt still lingering at the back of your throat. There is no apprentice. No one wants to learn this job. You didn't want to either. Not really. It's the kind of work that finds you when you've run out of other places to hide. They say the first bite is the hardest, but you've found the opposite to be true. The first bite is clean. It's the 100th that starts to taste like names you don't remember. Even the goats keep their distance now. The old one with the limp used to nuzzle your hand in the mornings. Now she watches from the fence, chewing slowly, like she knows what you carry. As night settles over the hills, you bank the fire and lie back on the mat that groans beneath you like it too is tired of your burdens. You stare at the beams above, tracing the old cobwebs with your eyes, following their loops and threads, like they might lead to something softer. You are the last to arrive. You are the last to eat. You are the last to leave. But still, you remain. And far off down the valley, someone has died. Which means you'll rise again, put on the same robe, walk the same muddy path, and eat your way into someone else's peace. And after that, there will be another. But for now, there is quiet, and it is just enough. It's always worse when the palace smells clean, when the air doesn't carry a hint of sweat or incense or someone's late breakfast. It means someone is trying too hard. Someone is preparing something, usually food. And that, for you, means a different sort of preparation. The slow, internal stiffening of the spine, the shallow, measured breaths, the tiny, pointless prayer that what's placed before you hasn't been gently laced with murder. You stretch your jaw as you walk, slowly, deliberately, as though loosening the muscles might keep them from seizing mid-swallow. The floor beneath your soft shoes is polished stone, impossibly smooth, like someone had the brilliant idea to make a hallway out of wet slate and hubris. It's colder than it should be, colder than the rest of the palace, a detail you once thought was accidental. You know better now. Cold preserves. And you are always close to something that needs preserving, whether it's the soup or the story of who it was meant for. The robe they give you is too fine. The fabric soft in a way that mocks your nerves. It drapes beautifully, but catches on the edges of your dread. Gold embroidery at the cuff. A sash that someone tied with too much optimism. You would prefer something simpler, easier to burn if things go badly. You pass the gardeners. One is clipping a fig tree into something vaguely decorative, vaguely aggressive. He doesn't look up. You've been here long enough to know that most people avoid looking at the taste tester directly. It's the same reason no one locks eyes with the edge of a knife. The courtyard hums with polite silence. Courtiers drift like silk-draped ghosts, murmuring things that taste of honey and suspicion. Someone waves at you with 2 fingers and half a smile, and you return the gesture, though you're not sure which part was real, or if they're already guessing how you'll be remembered. The doors to the tasting chamber open with the kind of effort that suggests they're more ornamental than functional. Inside, the light is soft, almost forgiving. The food, however, is not. It's spread before you like a challenge disguised as generosity. Bowls of rich, steaming stews, platters of roasted birds whose eyes still glisten from the glaze, jugs of wine that smell faintly floral and more faintly dangerous, dates stuffed with almonds possibly stuffed with regret. You approach the table with the same reverence one might give a sleeping lion. You don't touch anything just yet. First, you listen. Your ears are better than your tongue these days. You listen for the quiet rustle of a robe backing out too quickly, for the nervous sigh of a cook who spent too long stirring one particular pot, for the absence of a taster from yesterday who hasn't returned to collect their wages. Then, with all the ceremony of a priest beginning a liturgy, you take the first bite. Always start with the most fragrant. Poisons favor delicacy. Anything too bold, and the risk of masking the wrong thing becomes high. So you take the lamb first. Tender. Almost too tender. The texture makes you pause. You chew slowly. The flavor is rich, spiced. Nothing metallic on the tongue. Yet, you wait, you breathe. Your stomach grumbles in what could be approval or protest. Then the chickpeas, then the rice, the wine, a sip only. Enough to coat the throat but not drown it. You watch your pulse in your wrist. A habit that developed without permission. You wait for the telltale tightening behind the ears. The sudden cold sweat. The creeping numbness. Nothing. Not yet. But you never stop waiting. Your chair is simple. No cushions. Easier to fall from, if needed. The window near your table lets in a breeze that carries the scent of the king's private gardens. Roses, mint. Something sweet that does not belong to you. You wonder if anyone else in the palace even thinks about the food this much. If they know how much of their good mood depends on your digestion. The official enters finally, trailing silk and perfume. He nods toward the dishes. You nod back. They take the same bites, now convinced. You watch him eat what you just risked yourself for. Somehow, he looks more relaxed than you do. It's a little insulting. When it's done, you're handed a cloth to wipe your fingers, though you've already memorized every grain and crumb that passed your lips. You resist the urge to lick them again, just to be sure. That kind of anxiety is a little too honest for this room. Later, in your quarters, you sit on the edge of your straw mat and feel your heart still pacing. The floor is cool beneath your feet, and the scent of the day clings to your sleeves. Sumac, stewed garlic, that uneasy metallic twinge from the silver spoon you didn't trust, but used anyway. Your stomach is fine. For now. You boil water and steep herbs. Not to calm the nerves, but to stay ahead of them. You don't eat again. You never eat again after tastings. It would feel greedy, or like cheating death twice in one day. Instead, you nibble on a dried plum from your own stash, tucked behind a loose stone in the wall. If anyone asks, you'd say it's medicinal, which is not entirely untrue. You pass your neighbor in the corridor. He repairs shoes for the royal harem. He doesn't ask how your morning went. You don't ask how many slippers he's polished for feet that never touch the ground. You both exist in the margins of danger. His is soft and perfumed. Yours, not so much. Sleep is a negotiation. The mat is thin. The blanket's thinner. You lie flat, arms at your side, like a corpse rehearsing, just in case. Your dreams, when they come, are often flavored. You dream of foods you've tested, some harmless, some not. Once, you dreamed of an apricot that bloomed into fire behind your teeth. You woke sweating, but alive. There are days you think of quitting. of walking into the hills and finding a life that doesn't smell like human and potential betrayal. But then who would do it? Who would be careful enough? Cautious enough? Distrustful enough? No one else tastes the way you taste. No one else treats every mouthful like a riddle. They say trust is a gift. But in your profession, trust is a diagnosis. If you ever trusted too easily, you'd be buried in silk with a full stomach and very little fanfare. Instead, you remain hungry, suspicious, and breathing. And somewhere down the corridor, a kitchen is preparing tomorrow's breakfast with too much cinnamon. You note it in your mind, just in case. Because breakfast always comes with consequences, and someone, somewhere, is already sharpening the knives. But for now, you listen to your own quiet breath and the soft gurgle of your still functioning stomach. And slowly, the fear settles. Just enough. Until the next plate arrives. The morning drips in with the heat already half formed, as though the sun had been leaning on the world all night and only just remembered to rise. You shift under your woven mat, bones creaking like tired reeds, and rub at the stiffness blooming behind your eyes. Yesterday's linen dust still clings to your hairline. It always does, no matter how thoroughly you rinse in the basin behind the house. Death has a way of sticking, even when it's been powdered and perfumed. You stand slowly. The air is thick already, not hot enough to sweat, but dense enough to feel like you're inhaling through a blanket someone else has already used. You throw your work shawl over one shoulder, rough spun and faded from the oils you've handled too many times. It smells faintly of salt, resin, and old breath. And somewhere beneath that, the faint tang of last week's client, who did not believe in moderation when it came to fish. Your sandals scrape the packed earth as you walk. The sun glints off distant tomb walls, far too early and far too cheerfully. You squint at them, not out of reverence, but suspicion. The dead may sleep, but their caretakers do not. The first body is waiting. Laid out in the shaded rear chamber of the preparation hut, arms stiff at their sides, mouth slightly open like they were still trying to get in the last word. You've grown used to this part, the silence that hums louder than speech. The way each corpse looks faintly annoyed, as if death had been a bureaucratic error they had no time to fix. You kneel beside the basin and begin your work. The linens are stiff from age, rewashed until their threads lie down like exhausted animals. You soak the strips in the mixture, fingers stinging from the natron salts. Your nails are always rimmed with white crust by the end of the day, and your cuticles burn. You lift the first arm. It's heavier than you expect, as they always are. The dead don't help you. They never offer a shift of weight, never give the courtesy of a flexed limb or a tilted head. You do all the work, and they get all the blessings. You wind the cloth slowly, methodically, each wrap tight, but not strangling. The goal is not preservation of comfort, but presentation of purpose. A smooth passage, they say. Flies hum softly at the entrance. You've placed the balm pot there, partly for ritual, and partly to keep the smell from wandering. It never works. The heat makes everything bloom. Scents, regrets, memories. You try not to breathe too deeply. The face is the last thing you touch. Always. You've learned not to make eye contact, even when the eyes are long gone. There's something impolite about looking too closely, as if they might still be judging your craftsmanship. You dab the lips with oil, smooth the cheeks with careful hands. The linen shroud comes next, soft and wide, meant to wrap what remains of personality. You remember the first time you dressed a body. You held your breath through the entire process, convinced you were on the verge of inviting some vengeful spirit to dinner. Now, it's more like dressing an uncle who never thanked you for anything. Outside, the sun has moved enough to pool light into your corner. You shift the tools away from it. The ink, the scented oils, the brush made from reed fiber. Heat makes everything harder. Oils turn sticky. Linen dries unevenly, and your back does not bend as easily as it once did. You pause for a moment and drink from the clay cup by the doorway. It tastes of dust and leftover sunrise. The goat bleats from its shaded corner beside the fence, staring at you like it remembers every mistake you've ever made. You nod to it. At least it has the decency to smell worse than your work. By midday, the second body has arrived. A younger one. Harder to dress, oddly. The skin doesn't sag, but the limbs are rigid in their own stubborn way. You mutter a few words under your breath, not prayers, but reminders. Where to press, where to avoid, where the last dresser left fingerprints. The neighbors always talk. They don't like walking past your hut. They call it the threshold house, or the last dressing room. Children dare each other to touch the doorframe. You don't mind. It means fewer questions. The worst part is the hands. No matter the age or the life they lived, hands tell stories you'd rather not hear. Calloused palms, fingers curled just slightly, the stubborn little scars. You wonder what this one carried, who they fed, whether they ever wrapped linens like you do now. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. Eating between clients feels wrong, like chewing during a prayer. Besides, your bread from this morning was more stone than grain, and you're not desperate enough to gnaw on memory just yet. In the back room, your supply shelf leans a little more each season. It holds the polished stones you use for final touches, the carved ivory comb for smoothing hair, though most of your clients don't have much left to smooth, and the feather fan, which has never successfully fanned anything except your own guilt on particularly slow afternoons. You wish for a breeze, just one, the kind that dances through the reeds and forgets to be hot. But the air remains still, like the breath of someone waiting for a decision. You wrap the ankles, snug and clean. Your wrists ache from the motion. You press the strip down with your thumb and think, absurdly, about how someone might do this for you one day. You hope they don't tug too hard. When the last client of the day arrives, it's already edging toward dusk. The light has turned gold, slanting across the floor in thin, accusing stripes. You light the oil lamp, though it only pretends to help. Shadows gather anyway. This one is small. Too small. You don't look at the face, just the feet. You start there, quietly. Soft linen. No oils, no powders. Just clean hands and steady fingers. Outside, a neighbor coughs. A dog barks. The world remembers itself while you try to forget. When it's done, you scrub your arms again. Hard. The water in the basin is warm, and you don't know if that's from the sun or from your own guilt. Your skin is raw by the time you stop. You eat a bite of dried fig. Chew slowly. Let the sweetness fill in the parts of you that the day emptied out. Your mat welcomes you back with the same quiet indifference as always. The ceiling above is cracked mud, flaking slightly, as though even the house is shedding something. You lie back, bones humming, throat dry, hands still sticky with memory. Tomorrow, there will be more linen, more stiff limbs, more careful folds in silent rooms. But tonight, you drift off smelling of dust and oil and something vaguely ceremonial. And just before your thoughts disappear completely, you wonder, not for the first time, if the afterlife is cleaner than this, or if someone there is still dressing the dead, just like you. The sound of dried linen brushing against stone echoes faintly as you pass the empty hallway, still stiff from the day before. You're walking with care, more out of habit than reverence, as though too much footfall might crack the stale silence into shards. The scent of rosemary incense lingers faintly in the fabric of your tunic, clinging to you like someone else's bad idea. The palace always smells faintly of something burnt and something bloomed. It's difficult to tell which is which most days. You feel the familiar crick in your neck as you glance toward the high beams. Your jaw tightens automatically, already preparing for the task ahead. Your throat isn't fully ready, not after last night's chill and this morning's dry bread. But the court doesn't care if you're hoarse. The court cares only for performance, not art, not meaning, just the uncanny ability to sound exactly like a distressed sparrow in the middle of a feast. And so, with your hands tucked neatly into your sleeves, mostly to keep them warm, you shuffle forward into your designated shadow behind the chamber screen. You take your place beside a cold wall and wait, because of course, that is what you're paid to do. Wait, then chirp. You've been told before, by those whose shoes cost more than your entire year's wages, that your presence brings delight. A touch of the wild, they say, with the kind of fondness reserved for indoor pets and novelty hats. You do not correct them. You do not say that your training took years, that you once studied how a nightingale's call spirals at dusk, that you slept in trees more than beds, that you learned mimicry not just with your mouth but with your breath, your posture, your stillness. That's not courtly. That's inconvenient. Your tongue presses to the roof of your mouth. You shift your weight on the balls of your feet, careful not to squeak the wrong floorboard. One toe brushes the frayed edge of the rushes laid out to muffle sound, but they've long since stopped performing that duty. Their smell rises, old straw and faint mildew, like a barn no one wants to admit is collapsing. A signal, a cough, a pause, the way the lute stops like it's embarrassed. That's your cue. You purse your lips and push the air slowly, your throat shaping the first call, a long, high trill that falls into a warble. A linnet's dawn cry, slightly exaggerated for effect. The courtiers murmur. Someone claps. Someone else giggles. Somewhere in the room, a noble leans too far into the sound and spills their wine. This is apparently hilarious. You hold your position. Another call. This one quicker, a staccato burst like a wren in heat. You hate doing the wren, but it earns laughter, and laughter is remembered. You clear your throat silently. The inside of your mouth tastes like chalk and old apples. You think longingly of the cup of water you left near the brazier, now probably lukewarm and definitely being used by someone else. Your job is strange. That much is clear. Most days, you wonder if it began as a jest that never stopped being funny. Imagine, someone likely said, half a generation ago, if we had someone whose only job was to sound like birds. Now you're here, in a velvet alcove with bad acoustics, trying not to sneeze between falsetto chirps. You've been mocked by the hound keeper, pitied by the kitchen boys, envied by the stable master's daughter, who insists your job is easier than hers, which may actually be true. But none of them understand the pressure of an ill-timed coup. Sometimes they ask if you do owls. You do not. Court wants happy birds, birds that flirt, birds that beg for crumbs. No birds of death or mystery or melancholy. That would upset the queen. The costume doesn't help. A faded tunic dyed in earthy tones and trimmed with tattered feathers at the shoulders, as though you'd lost a fight with a turkey. You didn't design it. The court tailor did, and he's never heard a bird in his life. But it flutters when you move, and apparently that's delightful. You keep a pouch tucked under your belt, filled with bits of dry seeds and honeyed wax, not for feeding birds, for your throat. A trick passed to you by the man who held this job before you, a sharp-nosed fellow who now mimics frogs in a country estate for a baron with too much land and not enough hobbies. On feast days, you're called forward, not to speak, never to speak, but to flit around the edges of the banquet like a misplaced woodland creature. You bow too often. Your knees ache by morning. You're offered leftover goose in greasy napkins, half-sipped goblets of mead. The occasional wink from someone who thinks pretending to be a partridge is somehow alluring. You take the gifts. You take the humiliation. You take the handfuls of floury bread, the nods from bored children, the smug satisfaction of lords who do not understand that your job is not easy. It is absurd and practiced. and done while suppressing coughs from weeks-old chamber smoke. At night, your quarters are silent, mercifully so. A low cot stuffed with straw, a basin of water that's always one day too old, and a window that doesn't close properly. The wind makes strange noises through it, and you once mistook them for a vulture's cry. You laughed yourself to sleep that night, softly, quietly, like someone afraid of waking their own reputation. You dream often of forests, not real ones, but ones your mouth remembers, echoes of sounds you've never fully made. A songbird's call interrupted mid-note, the hush of wings through dry reeds, and sometimes, just sometimes, a rustle in the leaves that reminds you of something almost human. In the early hours, before anyone is awake and demanding chirps, you hum low and long, deep in your chest, a dove's morning call. It vibrates your ribs, feels like the voice of someone who isn't trying to impress anyone. You wonder what would happen if you brought that sound to court. You never do. Instead, you fold your tunic, press the feathered trim flat, wet your throat, practice your pip and your peep and your trilled whistle, and when the sun rises, too bright and too early, you're ready to be the bird again. Just not the one that flies, but maybe, softly, in a room that forgets you the moment you step out, you might leave behind a single note, pure, aching, misplaced, something that floats long after the feast has ended, something no one can quite name, something they'll try to hire again. And as you drift off in your thin bed, a feather still stuck to your sleeve, you let the sounds of an imaginary forest guide you to sleep, just before someone bangs on the door and says the queen wants a nightingale before breakfast. You're still peeling feather bits off your sleeves when the next day begins, half dream, half smoke. You can almost hear the tail end of that nightingale echoing in the back of your skull, the sound of courtly applause blending with the cawing of actual birds as they flap overhead in the pre-dawn dimness. But now, there are no velvets, no mirrored halls, no laughter clinking off polished wine cups. Just grit under your sandals and a heaviness in your chest that feels like something pressing down and warming up. Warmth. That's generous. What you step into is not warmth. It's heat. Dull, clinging, creeping heat that doesn't feel like sunshine or hearth fires or anything remotely pleasant. It is the kind of heat that smells of singed flour, half-burned wood, and the lingering sting of sweat soaked so deep into linen that even the wind won't touch it. The kind of heat that lives behind your eyes and builds. The bakery is already alive, though no one would accuse it of waking gently. The sun has barely begun to edge its way into the sky, but inside the oven room, the shadows are already dancing. Fire and smoke and heat live here like spoiled house guests, loud, inconvenient, and never in a hurry to leave. You duck under the lintel beam, which always seems lower than the day before. Your shoulders already ache from the weight of expectation, from the fan strapped across your back, from the dried sweat that stiffens your tunic like over-baked bread crust. The fan isn't some elegant palm frond. It's more of a wide oar-shaped plank, wrapped in strips of goat hide, heavier than it looks, and absolutely allergic to sympathy. Your job? To kneel beside the ancient, gaping mouth of the bread oven and coax it into temperamental life. You do not shape dough. You do not even touch the flour. Your hands are too dirty for that, and your purpose far more lowly. You are the one who feeds the flame, not with wood, but with air. A slow, endless push of hot breath over coals that sulk and smolder, waiting to be charmed into purpose. You begin with the first shove of the fan. It scrapes the dirt floor behind you. You lean into it, and the resistance is instant. It's like pushing air through soup. Thick, stubborn, invisible soup. The sweat has already started under your arms. You haven't even hit the second stroke yet. Every motion is measured, too fast, and you scatter embers into disobedient chaos. Too slow, and the heat dips, and someone above you starts muttering about ruined loaves and wasted mornings. There is no winning. There is only adequate. And adequate is what you aim for, breath after breath, swing after swing. The floor beneath you is warm, then hot, then suspiciously sticky. The clay tiles bear the ghosts of thousands of mornings just like this one, footprints in soot, drips of dough, the forgotten tail of a mouse long since crisped. You shift your knees and feel the grit dig in. There's no comfortable position for what you do, just marginally less painful ones. The baker, of course, has opinions, loud ones. He is a man whose belly arrives several seconds before he does, who smells permanently of yeast and self-satisfaction. He believes in yelling and pacing and telling you how your fan stroke lacks conviction, as if you're auditioning for a tragic play. You nod when he speaks, even when he's mid-bite, spraying crumbs like an angry grain silo. You keep fanning. That's your only real option. And you listen to the sounds of bread taking shape, wet slaps of dough against boards, the sharp snap of a crust catching flame, the low hum of something edible becoming inevitable. None of it is for you. You'll smell it all, of course, every golden puff of promise. But your breakfast will come later, and it will be hard, dry, and mostly crust. If you're lucky. The smoke never fully leaves the room. It hangs around your ears like gossip, curls under your eyelids, makes your eyelashes feel coated in dust. You've tried blinking it away, rubbing your eyes, even weeping once, though that was more from the sting than any poetic despair. Still, the smoke returns. It always does, like hunger, like sunrise. The bread is for the rich, or at least the important. Temple workers, politicians, those who trade amphorae and ideas. Their loaves are round, perfect, pleasing. Yours, if any are spared, are broken ends, misshapen remainders, bits that were too small or too burnt or too forgotten to matter. They taste like effort, like ash, like small victories. Some days, the heat is so strong it makes your lips crack. You taste blood and salt with every swallow. You learned quickly to stop licking them. That only makes it worse. You dream sometimes of shade, of tall trees and cold streams and breezes that do not smell of burnt barley. But when you wake, there is only the fan, and the oven, and the knowledge that the fire must be kept at just the right temper, never too low, never too high. Not for the sake of the bread, for the sake of the baker's pride. The old fan, your fan, is warped now, splintered on one side. You know its personality like a sibling you were never allowed to name. It groans slightly at the top of the stroke, dips just a little too far left on the downswing, and demands 2 hands even when your back is screaming. But you cradle it like something sacred. It is your tool, your tether, your suffering. The apprentices step lightly around you. They whisper sometimes about how they'd never take your job, about how the heat has melted your brain, about how you once tried to drink the soot water left over from cleaning the oven bricks. It's all true, or close enough. You let them whisper. You've been told you're lucky, that your job is important, that without you, no bread would rise, that you are the invisible engine beneath society's table, that you should feel proud. You do not feel proud. You feel tired. Your hands are blistered in familiar places. Your knees have gone numb. The fan keeps swinging. You learn to count the shadows on the wall, to track time by crust, to measure worth in size of satisfaction from men who will never know your name. And when the last loaf slides from the oven, golden and greedy for admiration, you exhale, not out of triumph, but because your shift is nearly over. You lean the fan against the wall. It slides slightly, as though protesting the break. You straighten your back and it cracks like old timber. You smear the soot from your cheeks with the back of your hand and leave a mark darker than before. You step outside into a sunlight that feels both hostile and miraculous. The air is barely cooler, but it smells less like work. You savor that. And maybe, just maybe, there's a bit of broken bread tucked behind the stones, left by the youngest apprentice who pretends not to see your hunger but never forgets. It's stale, dry, crumbly. You chew slowly, and as the warmth lingers behind your eyes, not from the fire, but from the sun finally acknowledging your existence, you hear someone shouting about a jam spill in the marketplace, and you wonder, genuinely, and not for the first time, if the person who cleans that up has it worse. You breathe deep. It tastes like ash and small mercies, and the day fades, soft, slow, and full of smoke. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, bells ring for a new ritual, and you feel it coming before you even see it. Tomorrow the fan will wait. But tonight, you let the shadows cool across your skin, and somewhere in the heat haze of dreams, a crust of bread sits perfectly toasted, untouched, and not yours. The scent of burnt crust still clings to your sleeves from yesterday's oven shift, though you've tried, unsuccessfully, to scrub it away with a handful of gritty water and something that might once have been lavender. It didn't work. Now you just smell like regret and herbs left out too long. But the bread days are behind you, at least for now. Today is not about kneeling beside fire or coaxing warmth from ash. Today is about teeth, other people's teeth, and the noises they make when those teeth are no longer behaving. You did not ask for this job. No one ever really does. But someone once saw you pull a splinter out of your own thumb without crying, and the next thing you knew, a woman with a kerchief tied too tight was pointing at her husband's swollen jaw and saying, "You've got the hands for it." As if that were enough. As if strong fingers could make up for the complete lack of knowledge, training, or tools. So now you're the tooth puller. The one who shows up when the swelling gets too much, when the broth goes untouched, when the moaning starts to interfere with the neighbor's afternoon naps. You, with your homemade pincers and your suspiciously dull knife. You, with the permanent look of someone who's about to apologize, but also needs to get paid. Your house is not a clinic. It's barely a house. One room, one stool, one corner that stays suspiciously damp no matter what season it is. The tools are kept in a wooden box beneath the stool, wrapped in cloth that was once white, but now resembles old gravy. You unwrap them every morning, more out of ritual than necessity. There's the crooked hook for loose molars, the chipped iron clamp, a bone-handled probe you once borrowed from a butcher and never returned. He probably doesn't want it back now. Your patients never knock. They arrive loud, leaning, groaning. Sometimes they bring chickens in trade. Sometimes they bring nothing, just the tooth and the desperation. You can always tell when it's bad by the way they cradle their faces, as if the pain might seep out and run down their arms if they don't hold it tightly enough. You begin your morning not with breakfast, but with boiling water over the fire. Not to clean anything. Nothing you own ever really gets clean, but to at least pretend to warm the tools. Heat, after all, gives the illusion of care. And the hiss of metal meeting water is a sound people trust more than they should. Your first patient is old Nicolo from 2 farms over. He's large, slow, and somehow always sweaty, even in the frost. He doesn't sit so much as collapse onto the stool. You recognize the look. It's the face of someone who's been chewing on only one side of his mouth for so long, the other side has started to rebel. You gesture, as you always do, toward the frayed cloth hanging over the lintel. It serves no purpose except to give the illusion of privacy. He lifts it and groans. You take a peek inside the cave of his mouth and immediately regret your life choices. There's something almost poetic about the teeth of a man who's eaten too many olives and not enough vegetables. The blackened edges, the gum line like crumbling masonry, and in the back, one proud molar standing half out of the socket, pulsing like it's got its own opinion. That's your target. You fetch the clamp. It's still warm from the water, and the steam clings to it like the ghost of competence. You wish you believed it. Niccolo winces before you even touch him, which somehow makes it worse. There's something about anticipation that turns pain into theater. You get it over with. Or try to. The process is not elegant. It's not precise. It's a matter of grip, twist, and hope. Sometimes you have to wiggle. Sometimes you have to lean your whole body into it, like you're trying to uproot a stubborn turnip. This one comes out halfway, then snaps. You both grunt. He moans. You mutter something that sounds vaguely like an apology. You go back in. The second try is messier. The third involves more blood than you were prepared for. When it's finally out, you hold it up like a prize. Niccolo doesn't clap. He just groans again and reaches for the cloth you keep soaked in wine and herbs. Not to disinfect anything, just so they have something to bite on while they reconsider their life. He leaves a duck. You didn't ask for a duck, but he says it's yours now, and you don't argue. The duck looks as confused as you feel. It waddles into the corner and immediately relieves itself on your only rag. Your second patient is a child, too young to lie well, too old to sit still. Her mother hovers, whispering prayers and criticisms. The child cries before you even open the box of tools. The molar in question is loose, already dangling like a curtain caught on one nail. You could flick it with your thumb and be done. But no. The mother insists on ceremony. She wants the wine, the cloth, the clamping, the full performance. You comply. Because you've learned that your job isn't just to remove teeth. It's to remove worry, to make the people feel like something serious happened. So you mimic the ritual of the morning. You warm the tool. You hum tunelessly. You set the child's jaw, and with one quick nudge, free the offending tooth. It bounces once on the floor and disappears into the straw. They leave behind half a loaf of bread and a handful of dried figs. You chew one slowly. It sticks in your back molar. You're not sure whether the ache that follows is sympathy or warning. There are quiet moments between visits. You use them to clean what little can be cleaned. You dunk the clamps in vinegar. You wipe them with the same rag the duck now sits on. You wish, not for the first time, that someone would invent soap that doesn't smell like old soup. In the afternoon, the sun hits your roof at an angle that makes the dust shimmer. You almost believe it's pretty. Almost. Then the goat next door screams, and the illusion shatters. The third patient is your neighbor's cousin. He does not want his tooth pulled. He just wants you to tell him it doesn't need pulling. You do your best. You lie. But his face says he knows better. He leaves with no tooth removed, but with that tight grimace that means you'll see him again in a week. Probably sooner. Probably with a worse infection. And so it goes. Tooth after tooth. Person after person. Each mouth a small tragedy. Each visit a testament to the body's refusal to cooperate. You are not a doctor. You have no license, no learning. Just calloused hands, a few tools, and a reputation that sticks like bread dough under your nails. You know what pain sounds like. You know the difference between a groan of discomfort and a scream of betrayal. You know when to stop. You know when to keep going anyway. By the time the sun dips behind the hillside and the air smells like warm stone and regret, you are finished. The tools are sticky again. Your hands ache. Your back is a question mark. And somewhere in your mouth, your own molar hums a little too sharply when you breathe. You sit. You eat the rest of the figs. The duck stares at you like it's waiting for orders. You stare back. Outside, the village settles into the soft noises of twilight. Wooden shutters creaking, a child coughing, someone arguing about turnips. You feel all of it pass through you, like a sigh you've forgotten how to let out. And tomorrow, someone else will knock, or not knock, or scream, or barter. and you will do it again. Grip, twist, hope. But tonight you let your own jaw hang loose and your breath go slack and your thoughts wander somewhere far from molars and canines and infected gums. And in that hazy stretch before sleep, you almost believe the ache in your own tooth is just the memory of someone else's pain. Almost. But it lingers, like everything else. The bitter taste of roasted olive pits still clings to the back of your throat as you wind your way up the stony slope again, feet slipping occasionally on dew-slick rocks that seem designed solely to remind you of your own fragility. The morning air is dry but not clean. It's the kind of air that lingers too long in sacred chambers and picks up the scent of too many offerings: burnt myrrh, unwashed feet, sanctified goat dung. The sort of perfume that claims to be holy, but mostly smells like someone left barley stew in a bronze pot and then forgot about it for 3 days. You adjust the woven pouch slung over your shoulder, the one stuffed with sprigs of wild mint, crushed coriander, the occasional bay leaf that's more bark than spice. There's a lemon rind inside too, though it's more decorative than effective at this point. Its edges curled like old parchment, and its scent buried beneath the earthy crush of older, louder herbs. This is your arsenal, your daily gift to the divine wind. You are not the oracle. You are not even permitted to look at the oracle for too long. But you are the one responsible for making sure that whatever sacred nonsense pours out of her mouth doesn't reek like boiled garlic and fear. No one trains you for this. No one teaches you which herbs soothe the throat without clouding the prophecy, or how to wedge a sliver of honey-drenched resin under the tongue of a woman who is halfway into a trance, and very much not in the mood for surprises. You learned through failure, through trial, through that one unfortunate morning when the Pythia breathed too deeply after chewing on old fennel and proclaimed the death of a visiting noble, who was very much still alive, if slightly offended. There's a kind of rhythm to it now, a process. You arrive before the crowds, before the chants, before the goat sacrifices start twitching on the altar. You crouch beside the stone column near the entrance, where the temple shadows still stretch long and cool, and you unwrap the morning's offerings, not to Apollo, to her, the woman of smoke and sulfur, the priestess who sits atop the sacred chasm like a slightly irritated kettle, waiting to hiss. The breath freshening is delicate. You have to time it between the incense wafts and the first wave of prophetic possession. Too early, and the herbs get lost in the haze. Too late, and you risk interrupting a revelation, which earns you nothing but glares from the elder priests, and perhaps a swift demotion to dung sweeper. You tried that once. You're still picking ash out of your sandals from the punishment. The oracle herself is not what the stories make her out to be. She's not glowing. She's not serene. She's usually sweaty, sometimes twitchy. Her breath in the morning is a combination of last night's lentils, mild resentment, and spiritual exhaustion. You are not her friend. You are not her servant. You are something in between. A strange, sideways presence she tolerates only because you prevent her from accidentally prophesying about mildew. You slip her a cube of fermented fig syrup, soft enough not to stick, sharp enough to cut through morning decay. She doesn't thank you. That's not part of the ritual. Instead, she chews slowly, her eyes half-lidded, her lips cracked from too many dry mutterings. She swallows. You count to 3. Then you slide the mint leaf under her tongue, like you're tucking a secret into a sleeping child's hand. By the time the first supplicant stumbles in, clutching their coin and their question, the oracle's breath smells vaguely of spring. You did your job. You retreat, not into the sun, but into the shade near the outer chamber, where the plaster walls still remember the coolness of night. You sit cross-legged. You nibble on a piece of hard bread that tastes mostly like time and regret. The priests chant. The smoke thickens. Someone sneezes behind a pillar and pretends they didn't. You stare at your fingers, stained green from too much basil, and wonder, not for the first time, why anyone thought you were suited for this. Your cousin sells fish down in the valley. Your sister works at the dye vats and comes home smelling like crushed snails and vinegar. You, on the other hand, spend your days delicately deodorizing divine messages. It would be funny if it weren't so tragic. There are days, rare but memorable, when she gags, when the combination of herbs, smoke, and prophecy turns too sharp and her body reacts. You learn to carry a second pouch, one filled with gentler offerings, tamarind, wildflower honey, a dried fig cut with caraway. Emergency breath medicine. You once described your job that way, and the priest glared so hard you swear your eyebrows curled. You think of quitting sometimes. You think of going to Athens, or at least to a village where the oracles aren't required to sit over mysterious gas-leaking fissures that reek of boiled eggs and underworld promises. But then you remember the alternative jobs: grain measurer, chicken foot reader, funeral sweat scraper, and you sit a little more firmly on the stone, accepting your lot. It's not glorious. It's not sacred. When the morning ends and the sun burns high above the hills, the temple begins to exhale. The last of the petitioners leaves, muttering gratitude or disappointment, depending on how ambiguous the prophecy was. You're called back in, not with words, but with a slight raise of a priest's eyebrow. You gather your cloth, your herbs, your small bowl of vinegar rinse, and return to the smoke-soaked chamber. She's slouched now. The trance fled. Her breath smells like ashes and divinity, layered like poorly aged cheese. You do your work, gently, quietly. A final rinse, a final press of clove against her gums. You leave behind a strip of citrus peel on the sill, not because it helps, but because it makes you feel better. You step outside. The sun hits you like an accusation. The wind smells of dust and old sheep. You walk back down the path, feet sliding again, pouch lighter than before, shoulders carrying the strange weight of unspoken service. At the base of the hill, a boy selling roasted chestnuts squints at you and offers a nod. You nod back. You chew one chestnut. It's burnt on one side and raw on the other, which is about right. Tomorrow you'll do it again. You'll mix herbs in ratios you pretend are sacred. You'll warm them with your palms. You'll watch the oracle's mouth open like a gate to another world and ensure that what escapes does not carry the scent of mortal rot. And when the wind shifts and the incense begins to cling and someone somewhere gasps at a vision, you'll know that your quiet little task, absurd, thankless, invisible, has given the divine just enough dignity to carry on, just enough breath to reach the next question. And as the temple shrinks behind you in the fading light, you feel it settle in your chest, a blend of thyme and lemon maybe, or just the faint satisfaction of another scentless sigh in a world that never seems to stop holding its nose. The goat greets you at the door. You forget how it got there. You always do. Tomorrow will smell like something else. You're still tasting hints of mint and goat hair in your mouth when the new morning greets you, not with sunlight or songbirds, but with the warm, wet breath of a city that's been alive too long. The sacred city doesn't exactly wake up. It simmers. It sweats before the sun arrives. It exhales steam from under every stone. Your hut is close enough to the central reservoir that the morning air always carries that unmistakable scent. Stagnant water, mingled with roasted cornmeal and the faint undertone of ceremonial incense that never quite leaves the place. Somewhere nearby, a priest is muttering over a bowl of something fermented. A child is crying because someone else stole the driest tortilla. The same sounds every day, a wheel that never remembers not to squeak. You shift your legs off the mat. The woven reeds stick to your skin like you slept beside a spilled basket of damp eels. You rub your neck, now permanently scented like limestone and mildew. And you think, again, that no one warned you, no one told you, growing up, that you'd earn your keep not with weaving or carving or growing squash, but by crawling into the warm, sloshing innards of your beloved city like some tragic two-legged eel. You are the sewer diver, the cenote whisperer, the one who gets called when things don't flow the way they're supposed to flow. And things, in this city, very rarely flow as they're supposed to. You don't dress for beauty. You dress for survival. A thin wrap clings to your chest and hips, not to protect you, but to give the illusion that something stands between your skin and everything else. It doesn't. You smell like lime and salt and ancient decisions. You reach for the paddle-shaped scraper beside your door, the one worn smooth from years of grim use, and a pouch of dried leaves you chew, not because they help, but because they distract. The path to the first canal begins behind the temple, just past the wall where the offerings drip down in streaks of dried blood and fermented fruit. You nod at the guard. He does not nod back. No one nods at the sewer diver. They look past you, or over you, or, on generous days, through you. The grate is exactly where it always is, except now it hums. A low, wet hum. The kind that suggests something important got lodged where it shouldn't, and has since begun the slow, transformative process from object to problem. You squat, you sniff, you sigh. Then you lower yourself into the dark, sour throat of the city. The ladder is stone, always wet, always slick. Your toes grip like stubborn roots, your fingers sliding into notches worn smooth by generations of cursed descent. Halfway down, the air thickens. It becomes chewy. It clings to the back of your tongue like bad news. You try not to breathe too deeply, because the last time you did, you tasted someone's dinner from 3 days ago. At the bottom, you're greeted by the water. Not cold, not warm, but the unfortunate in-between of body temperature and regret. It laps against your ankles like it wants to apologize, but only halfway. You light the resin torch that barely works in the damp and wade forward. It's not about what you see. You won't see much. It's about feel. It's about knowing, by pressure and pull, where the system's heartbeat is skipping. You step carefully, sliding your foot ahead before shifting your weight, because you've learned the hard way that a single unexpected slope can lead to a mouthful of ceremonial sludge and 3 days of fever. Above you, the city moves on. Traders shout, birds scatter, priests chant. Someone drops something valuable, and you hear the faint echo of panic that follows. Down here, none of it matters. Down here, you are not a person. You are a function. A plug in a leaky vessel. A nose that smells what no one else wants to admit exists. You reach the first blockage. It's a mess of reeds, half-eaten food, and something ceremonial that never finished decomposing. Probably a chicken. Possibly a small idol. Hard to tell. You wedge your scraper beneath it and lift gently, hoping it holds together long enough to move. It does not. It surrenders in chunks, drifting downstream like little forgotten regrets. You clear more. You push. You breathe through your mouth and regret that even more. A bubble of something burps past your knee, and you say a prayer, not out loud, because you're not allowed, but silently, to whichever minor deity oversees the forgotten. Your skin is coated now. With what, you'll never know, and that's a mercy. Your arms ache in that dull, persistent way that tells you you've been doing this too long. You used to keep count, of days, of dives, of blockages, but the numbers began to rot in your head the way the city rots from underneath. So now you simply measure in smells. Today is less rotten egg, more sour maize, an improvement depending on your perspective. You climb out hours later, blinking in the sudden assault of sunlight. A priest gives you a nod, not of gratitude, but of acknowledgement. Yes, you exist. Yes, you did the thing. Yes, you may now leave. You rinse in the outer basin with water so shallow and so shared it feels more like performance than hygiene. You rub your arms with sand and pretend it helps. It doesn't. The child who cried earlier now laughs, chewing on a fruit you can't afford. You pass by, invisible as ever. The city does not thank its sewer diver. It merely expects them to keep diving. You return home to your mat, to your reed walls, to the faint smell of vinegar and smoke that somehow clings no matter how far you walk. You lie down. The woven surface pokes your spine in the same 3 places it always does, and your legs twitch once, then settle. You breathe in, and beneath it all, beneath the smells and the sounds and the weight of sacred sewage, you feel it again, that slow, quiet thrum, the pulse of a city that pretends to be perfect, but runs on systems like yours, on jobs like yours, on hands like yours. Tomorrow, the grate will hum again, and you will go, and you will be forgotten, and that will mean you've done your job. Just as you begin to drift, you catch the faintest scent of beeswax, unexpected, oddly sweet, and probably a sign that the next task involves something stickier, something sacred, something worse. But for now, you are still. For now, the city breathes, and, for now, it does not smell like failure. The scent of beeswax and soot still clings faintly to your sleeves, and though you've scrubbed twice with coarse sand and muttered your small apologies to the sacred canal spirits, you know the smell is not coming out. Not fully. Not ever. But the sun moves whether you're ready or not. And today, you're not crawling through the city's guts. Today, you're climbing higher. Not in class, not in fortune, but in altitude, which regrettably means effort. You are the shouter of time, not a title you asked for. But here you are. Your throat has been raw since midweek. Your legs feel as though someone filled them with boiled lentils, and your sense of purpose floats somewhere between mild obligation and existential confusion. You pull on your outer cloak, rough wool that stiffened after the last evening dew, and wrap the thin scarf around your neck, more for the feel of routine than warmth. Warmth is never your problem here. Dryness is, silence is, and of course punctuality, dove. In a city that prides itself on cosmic precision, on astrolabes, lunar phases, geometry more complicated than your family tree, it falls to you to yell about it. You are the voice that announces the hour, the day, the moment of prayer, the shift of shadows. You are not a scholar, not a priest, not a timekeeper. You're a pair of lungs in a robe, a shouting sundial with sandals. You trudge out of your sleeping nook. The walls sweat slightly, their clay surface always damp with yesterday's humidity. Your neighbor is already pouring rinse water into a crooked drain. She doesn't greet you, but she nods once, a flick of her eyes. It means you're late again. Or possibly, the sun waits for no one. She's not wrong. Your path to the tower is familiar and entirely uphill. You cross the courtyard, where a single orange cat has decided your feet are a resting place. You nudge it gently. It stretches in theatrical disappointment and slinks off, probably to judge you from somewhere shaded. The tower steps are endless, 43 in total. Not that you've counted. Not that you mutter the number to yourself with every climb, like a tired monk arguing with gravity. The railing is made of something once smooth and now splintered, so you avoid it with a practiced lean. Halfway up, your thighs begin their usual complaints. At step 38, your right knee does the small pop that signals an oncoming storm or personal failure. Possibly both. At the top, the city lies flat below you, a sprawl of domes and sunlit dust, fabric tents and tiled roofs, all stitched together with threadbare alleys and distant murmurs. The wind here isn't clean, but it's better than the air below. You breathe it in through your mouth because your nose has still not forgiven last week's canal duty. You reach for the hour board. It's a polished plank of wood that tells you what you're supposed to yell. Carved symbols, notches, instructions that require a steady hand and a memory shaped like a filing shelf. You squint at the sun's angle. You check the copper disc with the tiny string. You consult the chart, which flaps rudely in the breeze. Then you clear your throat. And then you yell. You do not speak. You do not chant. You yell. Your job is not elegance. Your job is not enlightenment. Your job is volume. You shout the hour. You shout it like someone just stepped on your foot, and you want all of Baghdad to know about it. You shout it with your full chest, your throat, your ribs. You shout until the words echo off domes, bounce off marble, and roll down narrow alleys like a basket of dropped eggs. Some days, it feels like no one hears you. Other days, you catch a small boy mimicking your voice from a nearby courtyard, and for a moment, you feel nearly famous, almost important, almost like something more than a yelling mechanism with dry lips and stiff ankles. When you finish, the silence that follows is always the same. It's not quiet, but it's empty. Like your voice has pushed all the other sounds out of the way for just a moment, and now the world is figuring out how to start again. You sit down on the low bench. It creaks under you like it resents your weight. You pull out your pouch of dried figs and chew slowly, trying not to think about the ones that taste faintly of clay. Below, the city continues. A donkey brays, possibly in response to your earlier shouting. A merchant slaps a sack of something flowery. A distant bell rings from the astronomy school, one tone behind your call. You smirk. You were faster this time. Let the mathematicians adjust their stars. Your second call is due by midday. That gives you time to do very little. You use it well. You sit. You stretch one leg, then the other. You pick something questionable from under your nail and flick it toward the horizon. You rest your eyes, not fully asleep, but soft enough to forget the ache in your throat. Later you shout again, and again. At every appointed mark, you time it by sun, by shadow, by the faint clang of a copper plate in the courtyard below that someone insists is not a clock, but absolutely is. Your voice fades as the day grows long, not because you're weaker, but because the air itself thickens with evening weight. Sound moves slower then. It settles. By dusk, your throat feels like you've been swallowing straw. Your mouth tastes of fig dust in repetition. The final call is the most difficult, not because it's hard to shout, but because you're shouting into a city that's ready to ignore you. Lanterns flicker, doors creak shut, and yet, by tradition, you shout. Because if you don't, someone will surely say they didn't know what time it was, that you failed. That time didn't happen. You descend the tower slowly, one step, then another. No one thanks you. The city does not send up a meal or a song or a robe made of gold. You pass a goat tied to a broken wheelbarrow, and he watches you like he knows you've peaked. You return to your sleeping space. The walls are still damp. Your scarf still smells like sweat. You lie down on the mat that pokes the same two ribs every single night. You pull the corner of your cloak over your face, not for warmth, but for quiet. And as your breath slows, as the last call still echoes faintly inside your ears like a ringing bowl, you realize you don't actually know what time it is anymore. But you said it. You shouted it. You were heard. That is, somehow, enough. Somewhere in the corner, a soft scraping. A broom, maybe. A rat. A servant with something sharp and ceremonial. Probably nothing. But you suspect tomorrow may involve oil, or goats, or something you'll regret. But not yet. For now the city sleeps, and you, mercifully, do not have to yell about it. The faint scent of old smoke still clings to your sleeves, though the fire you last watched sputtered out 2 nights ago. It's always there, that bitter tang, charred pine and the ghost of singed rice straw, worked so deep into your robe that the fibers themselves seem to breathe it. There is no escaping it. Not really. The smell climbs into your bedroll with you. It curls behind your ears. It seasons your barley gruel like an overzealous condiment. Even the dogs in the alleyways give you that look now, as if you are part kindling, part mistake. You shift your weight on the wooden step outside the fire hut, which is exactly as comfortable as it sounds. The boards are always slightly damp, no matter the season, and warp gently under your thighs, like they've surrendered to the shape of failure. A splinter has lodged itself in the fold behind your knee. You do not remove it. You are conserving motion, conserving heat, conserving the illusion that this shift will be shorter than the last. It won't be. The fire watcher's post is not so much a job as it is a sentence with sandals. You are tasked with guarding the entire settlement's fragile peace from the single most terrifying and inevitable force known to your world. Fire. Not the warm kind. Not the kind that sits politely inside a hearth and lets you roast a sweet potato over it. No, your business is with the other kind. The creeping, licking, hungry kind. The kind that wakes up faster than you do and devours faster than you can yell. The kind that turns lacquered wood and painted parchment and thatched roofs into soot and memory. So, naturally, the solution is you, sitting here, watching, for hours. You shift again and curse the angle of your hips without speaking. The position doesn't change much. The ache simply rearranges. Your robe has developed a permanent crease behind your calves that chafes like old paper. The wind sighs through the alley like a bored relative. Somewhere to your left, a rooster hiccups in its sleep, or possibly dies. You can't tell. Your only tool, aside from your questionable eyesight and a wooden rattle that feels about as useful as yelling into a storm drain, is your ability to stay awake. That's it. That's the whole job description. You are not to doze, not to lean too far, not to dream, even accidentally. You are the fragile membrane between cozy homes and an evening headline that begins with tragedy. The irony, of course, is that everything about this position makes sleep seem like a very good idea. You are warm enough to forget your fingers. You are still enough to hear your own pulse in your ears. The flicker of lanterns, if there are any left burning in doorways, plays rhythmic patterns on the nearby rice paper screens. The wind is not cruel tonight. It doesn't slap. It whispers. Which is somehow worse. Because sleep doesn't leap. It oozes. And that's how it gets you. You adjust your posture. The joints in your lower back make 3 distinct complaints. You press your tongue against the roof of your mouth and focus on your breathing, the way the temple boys are taught to do before chants. You are not a temple boy, but you've learned to steal techniques from anyone who seems less miserable than you. There are few, but still. To your right, someone coughs, possibly the lacquer maker. His chimney always belches more than it should, and you're fairly certain it's not regulated. Not that you're in charge of regulations. You're just in charge of watching. You make a mental note of the direction. You sniff the air, as if that will help. You cannot tell the difference between chimney smoke and potential death anymore. All of it smells like your robe. Your thighs have begun to buzz, not with activity, but with inactivity. That strange, itchy numbness that's not quite pain, not quite warning, just the body's way of saying you're doing this wrong. You do not stand. Fire watchers do not stand. Standing is for people who can pace, people who can walk away. You shift forward instead, letting your knees crack audibly, as though the sound might alert any nearby arsonists that you're alert, and definitely not contemplating lying flat on your back for just 3 blinks. Your wooden rattle rests across your lap like a ceremonial relic. It's been smoothed by generations of exhausted hands, most of them far more dignified than yours. The grooves are worn from centuries of doubt. You tap it once against the ground, not to warn anyone, but to remind yourself that it's real, that you're real, that someone, somewhere might still be awake and listening. The night deepens. You listen to it decay. There are layers tonight, you've discovered. The early evening is noisy. Cicadas, sandals, distant laughter, the snap of cooking fires. But as the hours molt away, everything thins. The world quiets. The walls breathe. The straw mats shift of their own accord. Even your own thoughts begin to stretch out, soft and slow, like old cats finding somewhere warmer to lie. You think about the time you fell asleep. Just once. It was early spring, a drizzling sort of night that made the fire pots steam and the air heavy with ash. You'd closed your eyes for what felt like half a blink. The next thing you knew, the carpenter's apprentice was screaming about a curling bit of flame near the rain barrels. It didn't spread, it didn't destroy, but the shame of it settled into your bones and hasn't left since. You blink now, slowly, deliberately, and exhale through your nose. The night is different this time. No rain, no screams, just the familiar grip of fatigue and a street that seems to stretch longer than usual, as if daring you to miss something. There are rumors of other jobs, ones with softer hours and warmer duties, jobs involving soup, or counting, or simply sitting behind a silk curtain and offering sage nods at the appropriate times. Those people probably sleep, probably wear robes that don't smell like disappointment, but they don't stop cities from burning. They don't listen to the dark and hold it steady. A breeze lifts the hem of your robe. You press it down again and glance toward the communal bathhouse. Nothing. No sparks, no silhouettes, no whispers of disaster. Just steam, faint and low, coiling upward like a well-behaved spirit. Your eyes trace its path and then lower again to the ground, where your toes have gone absolutely numb. You do not wiggle them. You are not allowed such luxuries. The trick you've learned is not to fight the night, not to push it away. It only grows heavier when you resist. Instead, you let it seep into you, like cold through a cracked screen. Let it fill you with the weight of its silence. You sit in it, like soup in a too-wide bowl. You become the watching. Hours pass, though they do not announce themselves. You mark the time only by how dry your lips feel, how loud the silence has grown. Somewhere, a dog shifts in its sleep. A door creaks open, then closed. A final lantern is snuffed, and the world turns from dim to barely. You take one more breath. The night is almost over. Not quite, but almost. And that means the fire has not won. Not yet. You will not doze. Not tonight. And tomorrow. Well, tomorrow may involve something even worse. Like singing in court, or holding someone's oracle breath. But that's not your burden yet. Not while the embers still rest beneath ash. And not while your eyes still remember what they're for. The scent of burnt cedar still lingers behind your ears from the temple incense, clinging like a ghost that won't take the hint. It's not unpleasant exactly. Sweet, spicy, ancient. But it's grown heavy in your sinuses, like a memory someone else's grandmother keeps retelling in circles. The kind that settles not just in your clothes, but in your thoughts. Everything smells like omens, even your own armpits. You adjust your seating mat with the sluggish resentment of someone who hasn't sat comfortably in weeks. The reed fibers have worn down unevenly, so one corner digs into your thigh, while another flattens uselessly beneath the weight of poor life choices. The cushion is filled with straw that has compacted into something approaching wood, and the floor beneath it is dust layered on stone layered on more dust, the kind that sticks to your ankles like a guilty secret. It's always warm, but never comfortably so, like being hugged by a fever. You are not the dream interpreter. Not yet. You're the apprentice, which means you carry the clay tablets. You stir the ink. You remember the meanings of goats, snakes, and teeth falling out, and, most importantly, you nod at the right times. Sometimes you hold the dreamer's elbow when they swoon. Sometimes you keep the incense lit with an ancient fan that was clearly designed by someone who hated wrists. Always you stay awake. Always you pretend you understand. This is your life now, deciphering the scrambled nonsense of strangers while trying not to sneeze during sacred rituals. The dream interpreter, the real one, the master, has a beard with more experience than you. It curves like a prophecy, waxed and perfumed, braided just slightly, as if knowledge itself had weight. He naps through half the dreams and still somehow emerges with the perfect metaphor. "A fish in the reeds," he once murmured, eyes half closed, "means the child is not yours." The dreamer wept. You tried not to, not from emotion, from standing too long in sandals made of dried regret. You keep your stylus tucked behind your ear, though it leaves a smudge of ink that never washes off. The clay tablet you cradle is warm from your hands and heavy with bad grammar. Dreamers never describe their dreams clearly. Everything is sort of a lion, but with wings, or my grandmother, but she was also bred. You are expected to transcribe this nonsense before the memory fades, before the dreamer's expression shifts from epiphany to embarrassment. And they always do. Dreams are brave things in the dark, but they wilt in daylight. The ink is made from crushed berries, ash, and the tears of apprentices. It dries quickly, but your fingers never feel dry. They are always sticky, always smudged, always betraying their touch onto your robe, your face, your lunch. Your rice cakes have tasted faintly of blackberry soot for months. It's a flavor you've stopped questioning. You shift your legs beneath your robe. The hem is damp from the morning's ritual, where you knelt too long in a puddle that wasn't there when you first bowed. The water crept in like a petty curse, soaking your knees in slow revenge. Now it clings to your skin with the cold embrace of bad decisions. Every movement is a reminder. Every step sounds like squelched dignity. Your stomach makes a noise that could be interpreted as either hunger or a warning. You decide not to ask which. Food is always offered late here. The temple schedule revolves not around meals or sun, but dreams. The master's sleep cycle is sacred. It bends the day like soft copper. When he dreams, you listen. When he wakes, you interpret. When he eats, you pray that there's enough left for apprentices. The dreamer currently on the mat smells like barley and overthinking. He's described the same dream twice, and each time it has more birds. You nod politely, scratching lines into clay, while your mind counts how many times you've accidentally nodded off during incense hour. The master hums, stroking his beard like a cat sharpening its claws on a very expensive pillow. You know the rhythm by now. That hum means the dream is unimportant, possibly nonsense, definitely not a political omen. You adjust your tablet accordingly. The courtyard beyond the stone arch hums with heat. Sun bakes the bricks until they sweat, and the air smells faintly of sunburn and cooking goat. Somewhere, a market boy shouts. Somewhere else, a bird poops on a sacred statue, and the priest will blame it on Saturn. You've stopped arguing about these things. The world is full of signs. It's your job to pretend they mean something. You are not allowed to interpret dreams yourself. Not officially. But sometimes, when the master naps too long and the dreamer is still babbling, you whisper something about water being rebirth, and they leave with tears in their eyes and a thank you in their breath. You feel both guilty and pleased, like someone who's eaten temple bread without a blessing. It's not your role, not yet, but it's the only part that feels real. Your back aches from too much sitting. Your wrists ache from too much scribbling. Your eyes ache from too much incense. You are a creature made of aching parts, held together by obligation and a slightly too tight sash. Still, there are moments. Moments when the wind catches the scent of fig leaves and sweeps through the stone corridor like a sigh. Moments when a dreamer describes something that feels familiar, and for a second, you wonder if your dreams have met. Moments when the ink dries just right, and your stylus makes a sound like rain on tile. Small things, tiny comforts, enough to keep you here, pressed into this corner of civilization, half listening to prophecy and half hoping your robe doesn't split when you kneel. The stone bench is never warm, no matter how long you sit on it. The shadows grow longer, but the heat never leaves the walls. It rises from the floor like secondhand memory. You scratch another symbol onto the clay and wish you had slept better. Last night's dreams were useless. Something about a dog with too many eyes. You didn't bother to record it. Not all dreams are sacred. Some are just indigestion. You lean back until your spine cracks like a poorly translated omen. You are not allowed to yawn loudly, but your jaw opens anyway, slow and disrespectful. The master hears it probably, but says nothing, which is worse than scolding. Your hands are stained, your back is crooked, your mind is foggy with the half-truths of strangers, but still, you are the one holding the dream, not interpreting it, not yet, but keeping it safe, and that counts for something. Outside, the sun begins to slide behind the ziggurat, turning the dust into gold for a moment. The pigeons gather on the ledges. You squint upward and wonder if birds dream. Probably. Of grain, maybe, or falling. You consider making a note of it, but your fingers are tired and the clay is dry, and tomorrow will bring more dreams than you know what to do with. For now, you place the tablet gently into the storage shelf. You stretch your legs, quietly. You avoid the creaky floorboard. You whisper a thank you to no one in particular. And as the temple lanterns are lit, one by one, slow and ceremonial, you brace for whatever dream the master has next. The night always arrives wrapped in mystery, but someone still has to write it down, and someone else, perhaps, will one day pretend to understand it.